The rustle of leaves in the distance shattered the unnatural silence of Konoha's streets. The full moon hung high above the village, illuminating both shadows and rooftops with its pale light. The world held its breath in this precarious calm. The storm was on its way. The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, was standing atop the Hokage monument deep within the village. Though his thoughts were far away, his keen eyes scanned the village he had vowed to defend. His wife and pillar of support, Kushina Uzumaki, was standing next to him, holding their newborn son close to her chest. The gentle yet adamant cries of Naruto served as a reminder of life's brittle perseverance even in the face of anarchy. Minato extended his hand and lightly touched his son's cheek with a finger. "Naruto," he whispered, his voice full of passion. "You'll carry the weight of our dreams. Of this village's dreams." However, as he was speaking, their enemy's looming shadow started to move. The Nine Tails, a hideous fox with eyes full of ancient rage and tails like battering rams, rose from the depths of the forest that surrounded Konoha. The silence was broken by its roar, which was so ferocious that it seemed to shake the stars. Minato acted without hesitation. He disappeared in a haze of yellow light, taking Kushina and Naruto with him to a remote clearing distant from the village. This was a situation that no parent should ever have to deal with, but he had prepared for it. "Minato," Kushina said in a tremulous whisper. Her robes were stained with blood, and the seal that restrained the beast in the stress of childbirth had weakened her chakra. Nevertheless, despite her fragility, her resolve remained unwavering. "The village, our son." "I know," Minato said, bending down in front of her. A series of seals formed by his deftly moving hands were surrounded by glowing markings on the ground. "This is the only way. Naruto will be safe, and the village will endure." Kushina's eyes filled with tears as she embraced Naruto more tightly. Promise me he'll grow up knowing love. That he won't be alone." For a split second, Minato's hands hesitated, his determination waning under the pressure of her words. He said, "I promise," but the doubt in his voice was evident. He looked over at the Nine Tails, who were now fighting the Anbu and other shinobi, their enormous body tearing down entire buildings with a single tail swipe. He pleaded, "Stay strong, Kushina," with a sliver of a smile on his lips. For him. Light burst from the elaborate designs carved into the ground as the sealing ceremony got underway. Sensing Minato's chakra pull, the Nine Tails roared ferociously. Its massive claw swung forward in the confusion, determined to crush the young family. Minato, however, was quicker. He appeared in an instant, deflecting the beast's attack with his flashing kunai. After a brief moment, he was standing next to Kushina once more, his forehead dripping with blood. His resolve remained unwavering despite his labored breathing. "Naruto," he muttered once more as he removed the infant from Kushina's embrace. "You're going to grow up strong. Stronger than I ever was. You'll be the light that guides this village." Kushina reached for her husband, her voice breaking. "Minato, no," he said, "I love you," with a warm, bittersweet smile. Minato gave his wife one last determined look before turning back to the Nine Tails. The beast was gone by the time the villagers woke up the following morning, and the fires were reduced to smoldering embers. However, their relief was tinged with sorrow because their survival had come at a high price. The fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, had vanished. The rumors quickly spread. Naruto Uzumaki, a newborn child, had been sealed inside the monstrous fox. One face among the mourners did not show emotion. Danzo Shimura saw the anguish of the villagers turn into something more sinister. The child who was responsible for their salvation was the target of the mistrustful murmurs and the terror in their eyes. "A tool," muttered Danzo to himself. "A weapon forged in tragedy. He will be needed." Naruto sobbed in the distance. In a village too terrified to confront its own rescuer, his cries were the only sounds audible. Konoha was shrouded in the aftermath of the Nine Tails attack. The once lively village square now looked like a battlefield, buildings were in ruins, and streets were covered in rubble. However, the emotional wounds inscribed on the villagers' faces outweighed the physical devastation. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat quietly in the Hokage's office, his old hands clutching the edge of his desk. With the burden of Minato's sacrifice bearing down on him, the mantle of Hokage had returned to him. A council of prominent clan leaders and Konoha's elders debated in front of him, their voices rising and falling like the tide. With a firm, "The boy must be controlled," an elder slammed his hand against the desk. "He is a threat to this village. What's to stop the fox from taking over?" A younger council member exclaimed, "He's just a baby. But their voice wavered with doubt. Minato entrusted him to us. We owe it to him too. What we owe is protection to this village, Danzo said in a cold, collected tone. The Nine Tails is a weapon. If we do not wield it, someone else will. The boy must be prepared to serve Konoha's future, no matter the cost. Hiruzen silenced the room with a raised hand. Enough. Despite his composure, his voice was authoritative. Minato believed in this child. He gave his life for him, and for us. Naruto will be treated as one of our own. Even Hiruzen found the words to be hollow. He was aware of the reality. It would be difficult for the villagers to overcome their fear of the Nine Tails. Danzo lingered, his calculating gaze locking with Hiruzen's as the meeting was adjourned. You can't protect him indefinitely, Danzo muttered. The boy's fate is tied to this village. One way or another. As Danzo departed, Hiruzen remained silent, but his heart was heavy. In his heart, he was afraid Danzo was right. Naruto was swaddled in a plain crib at the orphanage, far from the heated council chambers. A middle-aged woman with graying hair and weary eyes, the caretaker looked at the child anxiously. There was only a restless silence after his cries had faded. The caretaker knew better than to let the kids near Naruto, even though they were playing in the adjacent room and their laughter could be heard faintly. Rumors were already circulating. Even the youngest children heard whispers about the demon child, and despite their innocence, they would repeat their parents' fears. Naruto stirred in his crib, his small hands reaching for the air. He gazed at the wooden beams of the ceiling above with his father's dazzling blue eyes. He was unaware of the mistrust and hatred that would surround him in the years to come. He was only aware of the dim, lingering warmth of his parents, whom he would never see again. Even though the village was still scarred from the Nine Tails attack, reconstruction had started 4 years later. Now a small, quiet boy, Naruto wandered the streets by himself. Even from a distance, he was easily recognized because of his blonde hair, which caught the afternoon sunlight. Everywhere he went, the looks followed. Soft but piercing whispers followed him, slicing through him like blades. Is that the one, the demon fox? Why doesn't the Hokage do something about him? Naruto walked more quickly, his head bowed, his little hands clenched at his sides. He had long since given up on trying to comprehend what they were saying. How could he have earned their ire? Why did they treat him as though he was an outsider? He ended up close to the forest on the outskirts of the village. The whispers subsided and the air became quieter here among the trees. He observed the water rippling over the rocks as he sat by a stream. The constriction in his chest relaxed for a second. Danzo was watching from the shadows without Naruto's knowledge. He was intrigued by the boy's reserved manner. Quiet resilience prevailed instead of defiance or a rebellious spark. Danzo was able to shape that quality. To the Anbu agent by his side, Danzo whispered, "That boy carries power beyond measure. If we can harness his potential, he will become Konoha's greatest weapon." The agent said, "Should we bring him in, Lord Danzo?" "Not yet," Danzo answered. "For now, let him remain in the village. But keep watch. When the time comes, we will ensure he understands his role." Naruto went back to the orphanage that night. He sat by himself in the corner with a small piece of paper and a charcoal stub in his hands while the other kids played and laughed in the common area. He drew lines and swirls that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside of him, but he wasn't sure why. His tiny fingers made instinctive movements that he was still unable to understand. The caretaker frowned as she looked over. "Naruto, what are you doing?" "Nothing," he muttered, holding the paper tightly. Her face softened slightly as she sighed. "Go to bed soon, okay?" Naruto lay awake, gazing at the crude lines he had drawn as the lights went down and the kids got into their beds. A slight smile tugged at his lips for the first time in weeks. Hiruzen was sitting in his office across the village, gazing at the Hokage monument through the window. Unspoken concerns filled the room as his pipe smoldered in his hand. That day, he had paid Naruto a visit and brought the boy a book about Konoha's history along with a small bundle of food. With quiet appreciation, the child had accepted them, his blue eyes looking for something Hiruzen was unable to provide. "I failed you, Minato," Hiruzen said in a low voice. "But I swear, I will protect him. No matter what." The stars outside glowed dimly, their light straining to break through the gloom. The intense tension in the Hokage's office was illuminated by the early morning sunlight that broke through the curtain cracks. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, sat at his desk with the burden of leadership pressing down on him like a mountain. Danzo Shimura stood across from him, his face as calculating and icy as ever. A single scroll with worn edges and a faintly embossed Uzumaki crest rested on the desk between them. "This is the boy's destiny," Danzo declared in a clear, determined voice. "It's time he understands the burden he carries." Hiruzen leaned back in his chair and scowled. "He's still a child, Danzo. Barely old enough to read these scrolls, let alone comprehend what they mean." "A child who houses the greatest weapon this village has ever known," replied Danzo. "Every moment we waste coddling him is another moment he remains vulnerable, unprepared. The villagers already fear him. If he doesn't rise to meet their expectations, they will turn their fear into hatred." Hiruzen's eyes softened. "Hatred will destroy him, Danzo. He needs guidance, not burdens." With his cane tapping the ground, Danzo moved forward. "You speak of compassion as though it will shield him from the reality of the world. That boy is a vessel, a container for the Nine Tails. But he is also an Uzumaki, born of a clan whose power once struck fear into the nations. If we nurture his potential, he will be unstoppable. If we do nothing, he will break under the weight of what he carries." The third Hokage let out a deep sigh. "You've already made your decision, haven't you?" Danzo gave a nod. "I have." Later on in the day, Naruto was found pacing the forest with his tiny feet, kicking up dust, close to the village's edge. This was his haven, away from the villagers, sneering gazes and whispered remarks. The stream babbled softly as it danced over the rocks, and the trees whispered secrets in the wind. "Uzumaki Naruto," a stern, icy voice called. Startled, Naruto turned around. Out of the darkness, an elderly man appeared, his bandaged arm propped up on a cane, his lone eye fixed on the boy. Naruto retreated a step, his tiny hands balling into fists. With a cautious tone, Naruto questioned, "Who are you?" "Danzo Shimura," the man answered. "I am here to tell you about your parents, and the truth of what you are." Breath caught in Naruto's throat. His folks, they had never been discussed, as if they were taboo subjects. His voice was shaking as he asked, "Why should I believe you?" With a slight sly smile, Danzo set a box down between them. "Because the truth cannot be ignored, no matter how painful it may be. Open this." Curious but hesitant, Naruto went to the box. Inside was an old scroll bearing the crest of the Uzumaki clan, an unfamiliar but strangely reassuring symbol. When his tiny fingers touched the seal, he felt a flash of recognition that he was unable to explain. Naruto asked in a barely audible whisper, "What is this?" "It is a fragment of your heritage," Danzo answered. "You were Uzumaki Naruto, the last known heir of a once great clan. Your father, Minato Namikaze, was the fourth Hokage, a man whose genius reshaped the ninja world. Your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, carried the strength of her people. And you, Naruto, carry the burden of their legacy." As he held the scroll, Naruto's hands shook. "My parents, they were strong. Stronger than you can imagine," stated Danzo in an uncompromising tone. "But strength alone is not enough. You have their potential, Naruto, but you must decide whether to rise to it, or let it waste away." Naruto's blue eyes widened as he looked up. "A burden." With a lowering voice, Danzo took a step closer. "The villagers see you as a monster, but you can prove them wrong. You can turn their fear into respect, their hatred into awe. But only if you embrace what you are and work to surpass the limits they place on you." With his mind racing, Naruto swallowed hard. He recalled the scowls, the murmurs, and the ongoing sense of alienation. He said, "What do I have to do?" A thin smile curved Danzo's lips. "Learn, grow. These scrolls will teach you the sealing arts, the power of your clan. And when you are ready, I will guide you further. But remember this, you cannot afford to fail. The weight of this village rests on your shoulders, Naruto." The scroll was spread out in front of Naruto as he sat by himself in his orphanage room that evening. Despite their complexity and strangeness, the symbols had a familiar quality. His mind was already assembling the bits of information as his tiny fingers traced the patterns. For the first time, the weight of being different wasn't the only thing he felt. He had a sense of purpose. Danzo watched the boy through the window from the darkness outside, his face unreadable. By whispering, "The burden is his to bear," he said. But whether he carries it as a savior or a weapon will depend on him. Hiruzen stood on the Hokage monument far across the village, gazing out at Konoha's lights. Thinking of the boy by himself in the orphanage, carrying a burden no child should have to face, made his heart hurt. He muttered, Pardon me, Minato, Kushina. I only hope he finds the strength to rise above this. With his small frame hunched over as though bearing a burden too heavy for his age, Naruto trudged along the village's edge. He had already picked up the language of loneliness at the age of 5, including the pointed looks, the piercing whispers, and the way people moved aside when he went by. The lonely rhythm of his footsteps echoed his life as they stirred the dirt path. The soft gurgle of the stream ahead was a relief from the harshness of the outside world. Naruto frequently visited this location, finding comfort in the bubbling water and the soft sway of the trees above. With the exception of the girl sitting by the bank, her golden hair shining in the afternoon sunlight, today was no different. At first, Ino Yamanaka was unaware of Naruto. She was occupied with picking petals off a tiny flower, playing a silly game of chance with her lips moving silently. Naruto paused, uncertain whether to move closer or farther away. He was rarely approached by others, and he had come to distrust goodwill. He was identified by the snap of a twig beneath his sandal. Ino's blue eyes met his as her head jerked up. There was silence for a moment. She called out to him, "Hey," and gestured him on. Uncertain if she was actually speaking to him, Naruto blinked. He pointed to himself and said, "Me. Yeah, you. Come here." Naruto approached cautiously, his hands still tucked into his orange shirt's baggy sleeves. With her head cocked like an inquisitive bird, Ino studied him for a moment. She questioned, "You're Naruto, right?" He gave a slow nod, anticipating the typical taunts or charges. But there was no malice in Ino's eyes. Rather, she patted the floor next to her. "Sit," was all she said. Sitting cross-legged a safe distance away, Naruto obeyed. Ino watched the stream while leaning back and supporting herself with her hands. "You're always alone," she remarked, sounding more perceptive than accusing. "Why?" Naruto's tiny hands clenched into fists as he tensed. He whispered, barely audible, "Because nobody likes me." Ino's forehead wrinkled. "That's stupid," she said. "You're just a kid like everyone else." Naruto looked at her with a bewildered and incredulous expression. "You don't think I'm weird?" Ino gave a shrug. "Maybe a little," she said, smiling teasingly. "But weird isn't bad. My mom says it's just another word for special." Naruto's mouth quirked, nearly smiling. "Special, huh?" Ino leaned forward and picked up another flower from the ground, saying, "Yup." Naruto reluctantly accepted it after she handed it to him. "This is for you." As he turned the flower over in his hands, he inquired, "What's it for?" "It's a present, dummy. Don't you know what a present is?" Naruto gazed at the flower, its fragile petals quivering in the wind. He had never received anything from anyone before. He said, "Thanks," in a quiet voice that was full of unsaid emotion. Ino smiled. "See, you're not so scary, and if anyone says otherwise, they're just stupid." Naruto felt the constriction in his chest relax for the first time in his memory. The edges of his loneliness were softened by the warmth of Ino's words, which covered him like a blanket. His voice was barely audible as he asked, "Why are you so nice to me?" With another shrug, Ino's smile softened. "Because I want to be. And maybe you need it." Naruto didn't have to respond, but he chose not to. The flower he was holding expressed everything he was unable to. He wasn't completely alone for the first time. Naruto and Ino sat silently together as the sun sank below the horizon, bathing the stream in golden light. The moment was fleeting and delicate, and the world around them was still. However, it was a memory that would last a lifetime for Naruto, the first deed of kindness that started to break through the walls of his heart. It had been a year since Naruto and Ino first met by the stream. In his otherwise chilly and lonely life, that brief act of kindness had turned into a priceless memory and a rare source of warmth. But since then, a lot had changed. The orphanage was no longer where Naruto resided. Driven by prejudice and fear, the caregivers had declared him too much to handle, and ejected him. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, had intervened and made arrangements for Naruto to reside in a dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of the village. After the Hokage persisted, the landlord grudgingly consented, and Hiruzen covered Naruto's rent. With peeling walls, a leaky faucet, and a broken window that let in cold air drafts, the apartment was tiny and hardly livable. However, it was the first place that Naruto could really call his own. The apartment's initial silence had been deafening, a reflection of the loneliness that followed him everywhere. But as the days went by, Naruto discovered that the scroll Danzo had given him provided him with a diversion, a reason. Fuinjutsu's complex patterns and symbols were a puzzle that occupied his mind and eased the pain in his chest. Naruto was sitting cross-legged on his apartment's wooden floor late one evening as the walls were shadowed by the dim flicker of candlelight. The scroll lay before him, lines of elaborate seals covering its surface. Naruto carefully copied the designs onto a piece of parchment with his tiny hands, holding a brush between his fingers. "Control the flow," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the patter of rain against the broken window. "Precision is everything." Naruto poured a little chakra into the seal, and it was complete, its lines glowing dimly. Nothing happened for a second. Then the seal opened with a soft pop, creating a tiny flame that flickered in the middle of the parchment. A smile stretched across Naruto's face as his eyes grew wide. He cried out, "I did it!" as his voice broke the silence. A few seconds later, the flame flickered and died, but Naruto was filled with a sense of pride he hadn't experienced in years. His escape was Fuinjutsu, a means of demonstrating his potential for greatness, if only to himself. The following day, with his scroll safely tucked under one arm, Naruto headed for the forest. He'd soon come to the conclusion that experimenting with seals in his apartment wasn't the safest option. Proof enough was a tiny scorch mark from an unsuccessful attempt on the floorboards. The forest had become his haven because of its vast areas and inherent solitude. Naruto unrolled the scroll and took his customary position beneath the massive oak tree. He meticulously followed the directions he had committed to memory as he spent hours drawing a containment seal in the dirt. The pattern had been finished by the time the sun started to set. Naruto inhaled deeply before pressing his hands together and directing his chakra into the seal. The air hummed with energy, and the lines glowed brightly. He put a pile of leaves inside the seal, and they were perfectly trapped by a shimmering barrier that formed around them. "Yes!" Naruto punched the air and yelled. But his triumph was short-lived because he heard a voice behind him. "That's amazing!" Startled, Naruto spun around. With her hands clasped behind her back and her eyes wide with admiration, Ino stood a few feet away. She questioned, gesturing to the glowing barrier, "You made that?" Naruto stumbled, "Ino, what are you doing here?" "I followed you," she said, grinning sheepishly. "You're always sneaking off, and I wanted to see what you were up to." With a sigh, Naruto scratched the back of his head. "You shouldn't have. It's dangerous." Ignoring his caution, Ino moved closer, crouched next to the seal. She exclaimed, "This is incredible," with sincere amazement in her voice. "How do you do it?" "It's called Fuinjutsu," Naruto disclosed. "It's complicated. I've been studying it for a while." "Well, it's really cool," Ino, who was sitting cross-legged next to him, remarked. "Can you teach me?" Naruto blinked, startled. "You want to learn?" "Of course," Ino smiled. "You're not the only one who can do awesome stuff." Naruto paused, his eyes darting from the seal to Ino. It was painfully hard to practice Fuinjutsu. But the burden of his loneliness eased a little as he gazed into her eager eyes. It might not be so bad to teach her. "Okay," he said at last. "But it's not easy." "I'm not scared of hard work," Ino said with assurance. "Show me what to do." The forest became their common haven in the weeks that followed. Ino's innate accuracy served her well as Naruto taught her the fundamentals of chakra flow and seal creation. Ino's presence, on the other hand, revitalized the otherwise silent area with her chatter and laughter. The loneliness was lessened, but Naruto still went back to his chilly, deserted apartment every night. His desk, filled with incomplete seals, became evidence of his development as a person and a shinobi. A tiny but constant light in his life, the recollection of Ino's support lingered. Naruto looked up from his work one evening as the sun was setting and the trees were bathed in golden light. Nearby, Ino was hunched over, her tongue protruding slightly as she focused on a seal she was sketching in the ground. Her tenacity was infectious. "Thank you," Naruto muttered. Ino looked up, perplexed. "For what?" "For being here," Naruto uttered. A playful smile formed on Ino's lips. "Don't get all sappy on me, Naruto. We've got work to do." The forest reverberated with Naruto's quiet, sincere laugh. He felt like he wasn't just getting by for the first time in years. He was developing, learning, and perhaps, just possibly, creating a life that was worthwhile. With the promise of change, a cool breeze greeted the first day of the academy. With his tiny hands gripping the straps of his bag, Naruto stood outside the academy gates. Even though the morning was peaceful, a storm of nerves, excitement, and resolve was building inside of him. He had the opportunity to establish himself and overcome the stares and whispers. Children his age were everywhere in the courtyard, their chatter and laughter filling the air. Naruto stood close to the edge, watching from a distance. The hum of excitement was broken by their whispered words and giggles, and he could feel their gazes pressing down on him. A boy said in a whisper, "That's him," just loud enough for Naruto to hear. "My dad says he's dangerous." A girl said, "I heard he has the 9 tails inside him," in a terrified tone. The words were a familiar sting, and Naruto clenched his fists. He tried to blend in by keeping his head down, but the loneliness enveloped him like a chill mist. "Hey, Naruto," a voice he recognized sounded, interrupting his tizzy. When he looked up, he saw Ino running toward him, her golden hair gleaming in the sun. Her radiant smile pierced the cloud of negativity surrounding him like a beam of light. With her hands on her hips, she teased, "Are you coming inside, or are you going to stand there all day?" Naruto paused, his chest's tension a little lessened by her presence. "I was just looking around." Without waiting for a response, she took hold of his arm and pulled him in the direction of the building, her enthusiasm contagious. "Well, stop looking and start moving. We've got an important day ahead." When they arrived, the classroom was already humming with conversation. Aware of the looks that were directed at him, Naruto hesitated at the door. As he entered, he was followed by whispers, with students bending to whisper behind cupped hands. One boy sneered loudly enough for Naruto to hear, "Why is he here?" "My mom said the Hokage made a mistake letting him in." Naruto's shoulders stiffened as his steps faltered. Observing, Ino tightened her hold on his arm and dragged him toward 2 seats at the rear. She said firmly, "Sit with me," her voice piercing the background din. She let her bag fall to the desk next to her and gestured for him to follow suit. Naruto concentrated on the constant warmth of Ino's presence at his side as the whispers persisted. She whispered, "Don't listen to them," with gentle yet resolute eyes. "They don't know anything." Despite the tightness in his throat, Naruto nodded. "Thanks," he whispered. A moment later, Iruka Yumino came in, and the noise was instantly cut down by his commanding presence. "Welcome to your first day at the academy," he said in a firm yet friendly tone. "Over the next few years, you'll learn what it takes to become shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. It won't be easy, but I know you're all capable." With a glimmer of hope sparked by the teacher's words, Naruto straightened in his seat. He looked around the room, seeing flashes of interest and disdain in his peers' eyes. He vowed to disprove them as he balled his fists beneath the desk. The students practiced basic chakra control exercises in pairs during the first practical training session. As others swiftly formed pairs, Naruto found himself standing by himself. Their suspicious looks made it obvious that he was not welcome. A boy jokingly said, "Looks like no one wants to partner with the demon," which caused a small group of people to laugh. Naruto's fingers curled into his palms as his chest constricted. Ino moved forward and positioned herself between Naruto and the boy before he could reply. She firmly declared, "I'll be his partner," leaving no opportunity for disagreement. She gave the boy a sour look. "Why don't you focus on your own training instead of running your mouth?" Before turning away, the boy stumbled and muttered something under his breath. Naruto was guided to a corner of the training area by Ino, who took hold of his arm. "You didn't have to do that," Naruto uttered softly, his voice barely overpowering the surrounding commotion. "Yes, I did," Ino said, her voice becoming softer. "You're not alone, Naruto. You don't have to let them get to you." Despite the tightness in his throat, Naruto managed to nod slightly. "Thanks, Ino." She smiled, her natural brightness coming back. "Now, let's see if you're as good at this as you are at Fuinjutsu." Naruto was emotionally and physically spent by the end of the day. Ino caught up to him, her steps light and happy, as he made his way home. She said, "You were really good today," as she fell into step next to him. Naruto gave her a startled look. "I didn't feel like it." She shrugged and said, "Well, I saw it, you didn't let them break you. That's not easy." Naruto paused, looking down at the floor. "Why are you so nice to me?" Ino halted and turned him to face her by grabbing his arm. "Because I know you, Naruto. You're not what they say you are. You're strong, and smart, and kind. And one day, they're all going to see it too." A warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time was stirred by her words. "Thanks," he said in a quiet, deeply emotional voice. Ino gave him a playful shove while grinning. "Now, go home and get some rest. Tomorrow's another chance to show them what you've got." Naruto felt a little less burdened by the day as he watched her leave. These kinds of moments with Ino had become his compass, a constant reminder that he wasn't all by himself. Her words were a glimmer of hope against the darkness that frequently attempted to engulf him. He arrived at his dilapidated apartment and sat at his desk, surrounded by incomplete notes and glowing seals. His determination hardened. He wasn't merely a Jinchuriki or a scapegoat. No matter how long it took, he would prove his value because he was Naruto Uzumaki. The buzz of excitement filled the academy's training grounds. The first actual test of the students' strength and skill was a sparring match, which was the exercise for today. With his fists clenched at his sides, Naruto stood at the edge of the practice field. His peers glanced at him with smirks and whispers, but he ignored them and concentrated on Iruka's directions. Iruka shouted, "All right, everyone," his voice rising above the commotion. "Pair up with someone near your skill level. This is about learning, not winning. So, give it your best effort, but keep it clean." Naruto glanced across the field and briefly met Ino's gaze, who nodded encouragingly. He gave her a quick, appreciative smile before turning to face Sasuke Uchiha. With a relaxed yet assured stance, Sasuke stood in the middle of the field. As students scurried to avoid being paired with him, a faint smirk tugged at his lips as his dark eyes scanned the crowd. "Naruto," Iruka's voice pierced his mind. "Why don't you partner with Sasuke?" There was a rumble of whispers among them. The weight of the looks around him suppressed Naruto's first impulse to object, causing his jaw to tighten. He moved forward and met Sasuke's gaze, which caused his grin to widen. One student muttered, "Don't hold back, demon boy," which caused some people to laugh. "Quiet down," Iruka, his eyes hardening, snapped. The tension persisted even after the students fell silent. In the sparring circle, Naruto and Sasuke faced one another. Naruto felt the pressure of all eyes on him, a mixture of contempt and expectation. He steadied himself by taking a deep breath. "Let's get this over with." With an unwavering smirk, Sasuke tilted his head. "Try to keep up." Dash. There was a blur of movement before the sparring started. Naruto had to dodge Sasuke's initial lunge due to his speed. The audience mumbled as Sasuke's deft blows drove Naruto back, his movements methodical and unrelenting. Naruto, however, did not waver. He had an advantage that many undervalued because of the time he spent learning about seals and improving his reflexes. Naruto twisted out of the way just in time to avoid Sasuke's fist flying past his face. Naruto countered with a quick turn and a low kick directed at Sasuke's legs. Sasuke leapt, easily dodging the blow. Sasuke said, "Not bad," in a tone that was almost reluctant. "But you'll have to do better than that." Naruto remained silent, his attention narrowing as he examined Sasuke's movements. Although the Uchiha was quick and accurate, Naruto noticed a pattern in his footwork, a predictable rhythm, a slight pause before each blow. Naruto sidestepped and used his momentum to knock Sasuke off balance as he charged once more. Sasuke staggered, his smirk giving way to a flash of annoyance as the crowd gasped. After a swift recovery, he launched a flurry of attacks that made Naruto defend. As their peers watched in stunned silence, the sparring grew more intense, with each boy pushing the other harder. Dash. Both boys were gasping for air and had perspiration streaming down their faces by the time Iruka signaled for a stop. The smirk on Sasuke's face had returned, but it was tinged with reluctant respect. Naruto looked him in the eye, his face unreadable. "Good effort," Iruka remarked as she moved in between them. "That's enough for today." The murmurs persisted as the crowd dispersed. As he left, Naruto heard bits and pieces of their conversations. "Did you see that? He almost had Sasuke." "Yeah, but Sasuke was clearly holding back." Naruto's hands were clenched. It was never enough, even when he performed well. He looked at Sasuke, who had admirers all around him. As he reveled in their admiration, the Uchiha's grin persisted. "Naruto," Ino's voice roared above his mind. Her face was a mixture of pride and worry as she jogged over. "You were amazing out there." Naruto mumbled, "Not amazing enough," with his shoulders slumping. "They still think he's better than me." With a steady gaze, Ino put a hand on his arm. "Let them think what they want. You'll prove them wrong in time. Just keep being you." With the weight of her words beginning to sink in, Naruto gazed at her. A tiny smile tugged at his mouth. "Thanks, Ino." Dash. Later that night, Naruto sat in his apartment with the scroll spread out in front of him illuminated by the light of a single candle. His thoughts replayed the events of the day as he traced the complex patterns of a sealing formula. A reminder of the distance he still had to bridge, Sasuke's smirk lingered in his mind. "I'll get there," he muttered to himself as his determination solidified. "One day, I'll show all of them." Naruto's brush moved steadily across the parchment as the candle flickered, creating shadows throughout the room. His resolve was stronger than ever, and his focus became more acute. It was more than just proving himself to the Uchiha. The rivalry with Sasuke had grown. It was about demonstrating to everyone, including himself, that he was more than the fear, the whispers, and the weight he carried. He was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the heir to the Namikaze and Uzumaki legacies, and he would succeed because of his father's genius. As the late afternoon light filtered through the tree canopy, the academy training grounds were bathed in a gentle golden glow. Naruto watched his classmates moving around while standing off to the side with his hands tucked into his pockets. The air was full of chatter and laughter, but he didn't hear any of it. Naruto had become used to the invisible wall that separated him from his peers, even though they were all around him. Today's activity was a group challenge, which is an obstacle course intended to assess communication, strategy, and teamwork. With a clipboard in hand, Iruka-sensei stood in front of the field and explained the regulations. Iruka said, "The goal is simple," his voice echoing through the crowd. "Work together to navigate the course and retrieve the flag at the end. You'll be graded on your ability to coordinate and support each other. Remember, this isn't a race, it's about teamwork." Naruto's eyes shifted to the groups of pupils who had already formed teams. Naturally, Sasuke was surrounded by enthusiastic volunteers. The Uchiha even attracted Sakura, who hardly ever acknowledged Naruto's existence other than to mock him. "Figures," Naruto whispered to himself. The familiar sting of exclusion gnawed at him as he clenched his fists. His spiraling thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice calling out before he could fully withdraw into himself. "Naruto." Ino's vivacious voice broke the clamor. He turned to see her jogging in his direction with a determined expression. "What are you doing just standing there? Come on, you're on my team." "Your team?" Naruto inquired in a doubtful tone. He looked over her shoulder and saw Shikamaru and Choji walking idly behind her. "Yeah," Ino replied, folding her arms. "I'm not letting you sit this one out. You're with us." With his typical expression of boredom, Shikamaru waved a little. "Troublesome, but Ino's got a point. You're good at this kind of stuff." With a bag of chips in hand, Choji smiled amiably. "Yeah, Naruto, let's do this together." Naruto paused, instinctively bolstering his defenses. Being wanted and included was something he wasn't accustomed to. However, his caution was diminished by the genuineness of their facial expressions. He nodded slowly. The obstacle course was harder than it looked. Teams had to negotiate a labyrinth of tautly strung ropes in the first section without coming into contact with them. With her keen eyes sweeping the layout, Ino took the initiative. She said, "Okay, follow me," as she squatted down and moved elegantly beneath the ropes. Naruto trailed behind, his diminutive stature making it simpler to maneuver through the openings. Choji and Shikamaru trailed behind, moving more slowly but methodically. Ino whispered, "Naruto, help guide Choji through the higher sections," gesturing to a particularly constricted group of ropes. Naruto gestured for Choji to follow him as he nodded. He said, "Just move like this," making a cautious sidestep. Choji avoided the ropes by imitating him. Meanwhile, Shikamaru whispered to himself, "This would be so much easier if we could just cut the ropes." Ino scolded, "Stop complaining and keep moving," but her tone was slightly amused. They were one of the first groups to complete the maze by the time they got there. A mixture of relief and pride filled Naruto's chest. He was not merely an outsider observing from the sidelines for once. The course's next task was to scale a tall wooden wall. To get each member to the top, teams had to cooperate. Crouching, Naruto made a makeshift foothold by tying his fingers together. "Ino, you go first," he said. Ino looked at him and hesitated. "Are you sure?" Naruto grinned. "I'm stronger than I look. Just go." With a coordinated motion, Naruto lifted Ino up after she put her foot in his hands. With unexpected dexterity, she grabbed the wall's edge and pulled herself over. Naruto said, "Your turn, Choji," and he braced himself. Lifting Choji required a little more work, but they succeeded with the assistance of Ino and Shikamaru from above. It was Naruto's turn at last. With an unwavering smile, Ino held out a hand. "Come on, hero." Grabbing her hand, Naruto scrambled over the top with the team's combined pull. After taking a moment to catch his breath, he smiled at his teammates. "Not bad," Shikamaru remarked, reclining idly. You might actually be useful. Gee, thanks, said Naruto, rolling his eyes in response. However, his smile remained unwavering. The last task was a puzzle consisting of a number of symbols engraved on a big slab of stone. To unlock the mechanism that held the flag, teams had to arrange the symbols in the right order. As he studied the patterns, Naruto's eyes brightened. They made him think of the seals he had been learning about. He said, "Let me see," and moved forward. As Naruto traced the grooves in the stone with his fingers, Ino and the others observed him closely examining the symbols. He whispered, "It's a sequencing problem." He gave Ino a tiny stone marker and said, "The patterns need to align with the flow of chakra. Here, hold this, put it there." Shikamaru and Choji helped with the other markers, and Ino did as he said. The mechanism clicked and the flag was released in a matter of minutes. "We did it," exclaimed Ino as he grabbed the flag and triumphantly waved it. With a sincere smile on his face, Naruto took a step back. He felt like he actually belonged for the first time. Naruto looked at his teammates as they made their way back to the starting point with the flag in hand. "Thanks," he muttered. "For what?" Ino tilted her head in question. "For letting me be part of this. Part of a team." Something warmer crept into Ino's smile. "You're not just part of the team, Naruto. You're the reason we won." Although Naruto's cheeks flushed a little, he remained silent. The weight of loneliness seemed to lessen for a change. Even though he still had a long way to go, the journey didn't seem quite as difficult with people like Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji at his side. The rooftops of Hidden Leaf Village were bathed in a pale glow as the moon hung high overhead. With the Uzumaki scroll Danzo had given him spread out in front of him, Naruto sat cross-legged in his small apartment. His fingers carefully traced the patterns as his eyes scanned the complex symbols. Every line was a piece of the puzzle he was determined to solve, and every brushstroke felt intentional. His focus was disrupted by an unexpected knock on the door. Naruto jumped to his feet in shock and hurriedly rolled up the scroll. His heart skipped a beat when he saw the familiar figure standing there as he carefully opened the door. "Lord Danzo," Naruto uttered in a steady yet cautious tone. Without waiting for an invitation, Danzo entered, tapping his cane lightly on the wood floor. He looked around the room with his lone visible eye, noting the notes strewn about and the incomplete seals. Danzo said, "You've been busy," in his usual icy, measured tone. Naruto gave a nod. "I'm trying to understand the sealing techniques. They're complicated." Danzo kept staring at the scroll that Naruto was holding. Fuinjutsu is not merely an art, it is a weapon. One that requires precision, patience, and secrecy. Naruto furrowed his brow. Why secrecy? If these techniques can help the village, why not teach everyone? Danzo's mouth formed a small, sardonic smile. Knowledge is power, Naruto. And power, in the wrong hands, can destroy everything it was meant to protect. Do you think the villagers would trust you if they knew the extent of what you could do? Naruto's hold on the scroll became more firm. He felt the weight of Danzo's words pressing down on him. They already don't trust me. What difference would it make? The difference is control, Danzo remarked angrily. You cannot change their perceptions overnight, but you can control how they see you. Act in the shadows. Strike decisively when needed. Show strength, but never vulnerability. Naruto tightened his jaw. Even though Danzo's words left him with a bad taste in his mouth, he detested how much sense they made. So what should I do? Danzo firmly put a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Follow my guidance. I will teach you the importance of strategy, of acting not for yourself, but for the village. He stopped, looking more intently. I am also offering you an opportunity, one that will set you apart from your peers. You will operate as an Anbu aid operative, taking on covert missions that will allow you to refine your skills in secrecy. This path will not be easy, but it will make you stronger. Surprisal and resolve flickered across Naruto's face as his eyes widened a little. Anbu, but I'm still in the academy. Danzo grinned again. Precisely. Your unique circumstances and potential demand unique opportunities. You will answer only to me and act in the best interests of the village. Do you accept this responsibility? After a brief moment of hesitation, Naruto nodded. I'll do it. Danzo took Naruto to a remote training area outside the village the following day. The trees were covered in long shadows from the harsh midday sun that had replaced the moonlight from the night before. Danzo said, "Today, you will learn the art of observation and misdirection," pointing to a number of dummies strewn all over the field. A painted target was used to identify each. A shinobi must think 3 steps ahead of their enemy. You will not only strike these targets but also set traps to ensure your success. As Naruto examined the arrangement, his eyes narrowed. What kind of traps? Danzo gave a slight smirk. That is for you to decide. Use the tools at your disposal. With his mind already racing, Naruto nodded. On a piece of parchment, he started by drawing a basic containment seal. Danzo watched silently as he worked, his face unreadable. After finishing the seal, Naruto applied it to one of the dummies and poured chakra into it. The dummy was surrounded by a shimmering barrier as the trap came into play. Naruto proceeded to the subsequent dummy, concealing an explosive tag under a layer of dirt. The hours of practice paid off as he produced a flawless setup with his deft hand movements. After finishing, Naruto took a step back, his chest heaving and heaving with effort. Done. Danzo nodded slightly as he examined the traps. You show promise. But remember, success is not just about execution, it's about adaptability. What will you do when your enemy finds a way around your traps? Naruto scowled. I'll make better traps. Danzo's eyes hardened. No, you will anticipate their moves before they make them. Strategy. Naruto, think beyond the obvious. Naruto's traps were tested as the sun started to set. Danzo sent 3 masked Anbu agents into the training area with the straightforward task of destroying Naruto's defenses. With his heart racing, Naruto observed from a hidden location. When the first operator activated the containment seal, the barrier came to life and ensnared the first operator. A second agent approached the hidden explosive tag while being cautious and avoiding the obvious traps. They were forced to flee by the ensuing explosion. However, the third agent moved with deliberate accuracy, effortlessly dismantling each trap. As Naruto saw his defenses fall apart, his annoyance increased. His mind was racing for a solution as he clenched his fists. Then he recalled what Danzo had said, look past the obvious. Naruto closed his eyes and concentrated on the movements of the operatives. A pattern struck him. They paused a little before each trap. He inhaled deeply and drew a fresh seal on a sheet of parchment. This one was more straightforward and intended to produce a bright flash of light. After setting the seal on a tree branch, he bided his time. Naruto triggered the seal when the third operative got close. The operative was rendered blind by the sudden flash of light, providing Naruto with the opportunity to attack. Leaping from his hiding place, he tackled the agent to the ground. Danzo's voice rang out, enough, and the exercise was stopped. The agents withdrew, their masks concealing any signs of praise or criticism. Danzo walked over to Naruto, tapping the ground with his cane. Impressive. You adapted to the situation and used your surroundings to your advantage. With a tiny smile tugging at his lips, Naruto wiped the perspiration from his brow. Thanks, Lord Danzo. Danzo's face softened just a little. Remember, Naruto, strength comes not just from power, but from the ability to think and act with purpose. Naruto nodded, his determination solidifying. He would take these lessons with him and use them to shape his future as a village protector as well as a shinobi. When Naruto got back to his apartment that night, the Uzumaki scroll was spread out in front of him once more. His thoughts returned to Danzo's remarks as he examined the complex patterns. He whispered, think beyond the obvious, with a small smile. The pragmatist lessons had shaped not only his abilities but also his attitude. Naruto felt a sense of clarity for the first time, even though he knew he still had a lot to learn. Although the road ahead was difficult, he got stronger with every step, not only for himself but also for the village he had vowed to defend. Over the Hidden Leaf Village, the sun had just started to rise, illuminating the skies with pink and orange tones. With his typical scrolls and parchment strewn all over him, Naruto sat cross-legged on the grassy training field. A rare moment of tranquility was offered by the distant chirping of birds and the cool, dew-heavy morning air. However, Naruto's thoughts were far from motionless. He was troubled by what had happened the night before, his covert training under Danzo's supervision. His mind was consumed by the inconsistencies in his life as he ran a finger along an incomplete seal. Knowledge is power, but power must be used in secret, Danzo's words replayed in his mind. However, there was something lacking, even vacuous, about those words. A shadow passed over him and his fingers froze. Naruto, a friendly, well-known voice said. When Naruto looked up, he saw the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, standing a short distance away. Under his ceremonial hat, the old man's gentle expression conveyed a commanding yet reassuring presence. Lord Hokage, Naruto said, hastily getting to his feet and making a respectful bow. Hiruzen gave a small laugh. There's no need for that, Naruto. I'm just here to talk. Curious, Naruto stood up straight. He was seldom approached by Hiruzen outside of formal situations, so his unexpected appearance felt noteworthy. Naruto reluctantly complied with the Hokage's motion for him to sit. You've been working hard, Hiruzen remarked, gesturing to the strewn scrolls and seals. Fuinjutsu is a rare art, one that requires immense focus and dedication. Your parents would be proud. When his parents were mentioned, Naruto's breath caught. You knew them. Hiruzen nodded as his eyes grew softer. Your father, Minato Namikaze, was one of the most gifted shinobi I've ever known. And your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, was a force of nature, filled with love and determination. They sacrificed everything to protect this village, and to protect you. Naruto's fingers curled into the grass as he forcefully swallowed. If they cared so much, why does everyone hate me? Heavy with unsaid suffering, the question lingered in the air. The boy's weakness made Hiruzen's heart hurt. He put a comforting hand on Naruto's shoulder. People fear what they don't understand, Hiruzen remarked softly. The burden you carry is great, Naruto, but it is not your fault. Their fear comes from ignorance, not truth. And truth has a way of shining through, even in the darkest times. Naruto raised his head, doubt and hope mixed together in his blue eyes. But what if I can't change their minds? Hiruzen grinned. Compassion, Naruto. It is the greatest strength a shinobi can possess. Power can protect, but compassion can heal. Show them who you truly are, not through words, but through your actions. Naruto's thoughts were racing as his eyes strayed to his seals. But, what if compassion isn't enough? Hiruzen's tone stayed gentle, but his expression became serious. Compassion is not a weakness, nor is it a guarantee of success. It is a choice, a difficult one. But in choosing compassion, you honor your parents' legacy and forge a path that others will follow. Naruto's mouth formed a thin line. Hiruzen's words weighed heavily on his chest, but instead of weighing him down, the stone grounded him. The opposing teachings of Danzo and Hiruzen started to solidify in his mind for the first time in weeks. He was determined to solve the larger puzzle that each piece represented. Silently, Naruto said, "Thank you, Lord Hokage, I'll try." A tiny but sincere smile of pride came back to Hiruzen's face. That's all anyone can ask. Remember, Naruto, strength is not measured by how many battles you win, but by how many people you protect. For a while, the two sat silently as the morning sun rose higher in the sky. Hiruzen looked back at Naruto as he stood up to walk away. His eyes showed years of concern and wisdom, and his face darkened. Naruto, before I go, there is something I wish to share with you. Naruto raised his head, his interest rekindled. What is it? With a sigh, Hiruzen's eyes strayed to the horizon. Danzo and I have different views on how best to guide you. He sees your potential as a weapon, a tool to ensure the village's survival at any cost. I see your potential as a bridge, a way to unite the village through understanding and bonds. This is why I ask you to consider the impact of every choice you make. Your actions will define the path you walk and the legacy you leave. With Hiruzen's words weighing heavily on him, Naruto furrowed his brow. Do you think Lord Danzo is wrong? Hiruzen's unwavering eyes locked with Naruto's. Danzo believes in his methods, as I believe in mine. But remember, Naruto, you have the power to choose which lessons you carry forward. Compassion and strength are not mutually exclusive. Together, they create true leadership. Hiruzen's words were broken up by a flashback that showed him and Danzo talking in the Hokage's office. Tension was evident as the two men stood on opposite sides of the room. Danzo's tone was abrasive as he said, "You spoil the boy too much, Hiruzen. He needs to learn the reality of the world if he is to survive it. And you risk breaking his spirit with your cold pragmatism," added Hiruzen. Naruto carries a burden heavier than any child should bear. He needs guidance, not manipulation. One of Danzo's eyes narrowed. Guidance without discipline is a recipe for failure. You're blind if you can't see that. And you're blind to the strength that comes from compassion, Hiruzen retorted. If we turn him into a weapon, we will lose the very thing that makes him special. Hiruzen turned to Naruto, his voice full of quiet conviction, and the flashback faded. Choose your path wisely, Naruto. The world is not as simple as right and wrong, but the choices you make will define not just your future, but the future of those who come after you. Despite the enormity of his challenges, Naruto's heart was lighter as he watched the Hokage's retreating figure. He returned to his seals with fresh resolve, the designs acquiring new significance. His goal was evident and his strokes were steady this time. He came to see compassion as more than just a strength, it was a decision he was prepared to make at all costs. Naruto Uzumaki was standing outside a plain building close to the Hidden Leaf Village's edge, which was enveloped in a peaceful evening silence. His mind was focused on the task at hand, even as the cool breeze brushed against his face. He kept thinking about what Danzo had said earlier, this mission will test your resolve and adaptability. Remember, you are a shinobi of Konoha, and everything you do must serve the village. Under Danzo's covert supervision, Naruto had been honing his fuinjutsu, stealth, and deception skills for the past few weeks. These lessons would be tested for the first time tonight. A masked Anbu agent appeared through the creaking door, moving silently and precisely. Naruto Uzumaki, the agent said in a neutral yet authoritative tone. Naruto stood up. Yes, follow me. The briefing will be quick. He trailed the agent through dark corridors until they arrived at a tiny chamber. On a table were a scroll and a basic map. With his cane leaning against the wall, Danzo stood at the far end. Your objective, Danzo said in a stern voice, is to infiltrate a merchant's warehouse suspected of harboring illegal weapons destined for Konoha's enemies. You will not act alone. Kakashi Hatake will oversee your mission, but make no mistake, your role is pivotal. This is an opportunity to prove your value. Naruto's heart pounded. It was thrilling and intimidating to work with someone as well-known as Kakashi. Despite the flutter in his chest, he said, "Understood, Lord Danzo," in a steady voice. As he watched Naruto outside the village gates, Kakashi's slack manner belied the intense focus in his one visible eye. He said, "Well, you're smaller than I expected," in a light-hearted but kind tone. Naruto scowled but refrained from responding. What's the plan, Kakashi-sensei? At the title, Kakashi's eyebrow arched, but he didn't correct him. Rather, he unfolded the map that Danzo had previously shown Naruto. Your job is to set up a containment seal around the warehouse. Once you've done that, I'll deal with anyone inside. Naruto said softly, what if they notice me? Kakashi's open eye wrinkled in laughter. Then you'd better hope you're faster than them. The warehouse, encircled by barrels and crates piled carelessly, was a shadowy figure against the starry sky. Naruto sketched out the base of the seal on a scroll while crouching behind a pile of wooden boxes, his hands moving with practiced precision. As he directed his chakra into the markings, the air hummed with tension, making sure the lines glowed dimly before disappearing into thin air. He froze at a sound behind him. His hand automatically reached for the kunai strapped to his thigh as he held his breath. A shadow moved, but it was just Kakashi, who nodded in agreement before vanishing once more into the shadows. In Kakashi's view, Naruto was a mystery. The boy moved with a level of concentration and accuracy that seemed well beyond his years. The smallest flicker of familiarity hit Kakashi as he watched. That posture, that purposeful manner of working, it was strange, almost like he was seeing a resemblance to someone he had known. His mind strayed to his former sensei, Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage. With his blonde hair and intense, focused eyes, Naruto bore a striking resemblance to Minato. It wasn't just physical, though, there was something in Naruto's subdued resolve that reflected Minato's own strategy for overcoming obstacles. Is it all a coincidence? Kakashi pondered, though a tiny part of him yearned for clarification. Kakashi observed Naruto's peculiar discipline while leaning against a nearby crate. Curiosity flashed through his mind. Why is Danzo so attached to this child? To what extent has he been trained? Kakashi was distracted from his thoughts by the flicker of a seal activating. He observed Naruto's deliberate, almost methodical, placement of the scrolls around the perimeter. Kakashi's visible eye widened slightly as the complex seal activated, shimmering momentarily before disappearing. His mind raced as he realized, that's fuinjutsu. This is sophisticated work, not merely simple storage seals. How can a student in the academy even start to understand something this complicated? Kakashi's mind wavered between admiration and discomfort. Even among experienced shinobi, fuinjutsu was a rare art, and Naruto had performed it with a level of skill that belied his age. Did he learn this from Danzo? Or is there more to it? Intrinsic. Kakashi squinted. This isn't typical training at the academy level. How did he find out about this? Refocusing on the task, Naruto let out a slow exhale. Placing the scrolls at key locations, he circled the warehouse. He took deliberate steps, mentally repeating Danzo's advice: think beyond the obvious. Anticipate your enemy's moves. A shout came from inside the warehouse as he set down the last scroll. Intruders. Naruto felt sick to his stomach. As the warehouse doors flew open, he scurried to the side and hid behind a pile of crates. Two armed men stepped out, looking around. I told you I heard something, one of them whispered. Another kunai came into contact with Naruto's fingers. His heart was thumping loudly in his ears. How would Danzo respond? He pondered. No. How would Hiruzen respond? Kakashi materialized behind them in a blur before the men could get close to his hiding place. He quickly pinned one against the wall and knocked the other unconscious. All clear, Naruto, Kakashi said in a composed yet firm voice. As Naruto came out of hiding, Kakashi's eyes remained fixed on him. His calmness and discipline, which Kakashi seldom saw in academy students, had an unsettling quality. Beyond that, though, Kakashi experienced a sense of obligation. He was reminded of the pledge he had once made to Minato to protect those who were valuable by watching Naruto. Kakashi was unaware of Naruto's actual ancestry, but the boy's tenacity and passion seemed to reflect the principles Minato valued. Kakashi thought, this kid has the kind of potential Minato believed in. Kakashi thought grimly, I can't let Danzo use him as a tool, whether he's related to him or not. Danzo's influence is written all over him. I must ascertain Danzo's intentions regarding this child. When Kakashi signaled, Naruto nodded. He said, just need to activate it, and moved into the middle of the designated area. He channeled his chakra and made a hand seal. The containment seal created an imperceptible barrier around the warehouse, causing the air to shimmer. Kakashi remarked, good work, with a hint of sincere praise in his voice. Let's finish this. The remainder of the mission went by quickly. Without any more incidents, the weapons were seized and the warehouse was secured. By the time they got back to the village, the horizon was painted with the first signs of dawn. At the village gates, Danzo was waiting for them. As Kakashi provided a succinct report, his piercing eyes evaluated Naruto. He performed well, Kakashi said in a neutral yet straightforward tone. Danzo's face was still unreadable. Good. Remember, Naruto, this is only the beginning. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, your training continues. Naruto bowed slightly, a tiny glimmer of pride overriding his fatigue. Yes, Lord Danzo. Kakashi's mind was racing with questions as he watched Naruto leave. He is capable. Too much so. Danzo, what secrets are you keeping? And what is this boy carrying? However, Kakashi felt the weight of something personal more than the inquiries concerning Danzo. Kakashi realized what he had lost when he saw Naruto's spark and his quiet fortitude. Perhaps without Naruto even recognizing it, Minato's dream of a united village and his unwavering faith in his team now flickered in this boy. Kakashi reflected on how the loss of Obito, Rin, and Minato had influenced him and the innumerable times he had failed to protect them. I was unable to save them. However, Kakashi sighed, a rare moment of seriousness replacing his usual carefree manner. But this boy, maybe I can make a difference this time. I'll make sure he stays safe for Minato, this village, and the future because this boy is more than he appears to be. Naruto found himself mentally reliving the events of the previous evening as he walked back to his apartment. He wondered what the seasoned shinobi had learned about him from Kakashi's measured words and subtle glances. He felt for the first time that he had advanced, not only as a shinobi but also as a potential protector of the village that had abandoned him. As Iruka Umino described the day's practical exercise, the academy grounds hummed with activity. Teams of 3 were tasked with navigating through a wooded area while avoiding obstacles and traps in order to retrieve a flagged scroll that was concealed in a mock enemy camp. Collaboration, planning, and resourcefulness were necessary for success, the ideal setting for the students to demonstrate their development. Already feeling the uneasiness in the air, Naruto Uzumaki stood to the side with his hands in his pockets. His name was called along with Sakura Haruno's and another students as Iruka started allocating teams. Sakura responded right away. What? She moaned, loud enough to make the other students laugh. She looked longingly at Sasuke Uchiha, who had been paired with 2 other students, and asked, why'd I have to work with him? Naruto forced a smile despite his tense shoulders. Don't worry, Sakura, I'll make sure we win this thing. Sakura glared at him. Just don't get in my way. Naruto didn't realize how painful the words were. He laughed a little awkwardly, but on the inside, he decided to try his hardest, not to win Sakura over, but to show that he was capable of carrying his own weight. The teams dispersed into the woods as the exercise got underway. With caution, Sakura, Naruto, and their third teammate moved forward, with Naruto leading the way. His senses were sharpened by endless hours of training under Danzo's rigorous supervision, and he moved with practiced precision. Naruto stopped the group as they got closer to the first obstacle, a tripwire set up to detonate a barrage of innocuous but shocking smoke bombs. "Wait," he said, lowering himself. "There's a trap here. Let me disarm it." Sakura yelled, "What are you talking about? We don't have time for this. Just step over it." Ignoring her, Naruto used his fingers to carefully trace the tripwire before removing a tiny sealing tag. He quickly turned off the mechanism, making the trap ineffective. He grinned triumphantly as he turned back to Sakura. "See, no problem," Sakura whispered, "show off," and brushed by him. "You're just trying to look cool." Naruto's smile wavered, but he remained silent. The group persisted, following Naruto's instructions as they made their way across the mock battlefield. Naruto came up with a strategy to get the scroll without setting off the nearby traps when they eventually arrived at the enemy camp. "I'll go in first and disable the seals around the scroll," he replied. "You two can cover me from here." Sakura insisted, "Why should we listen to you? You're not the leader." Naruto answered calmly but firmly, "Do you have a better plan?" Sakura sighed but remained silent. Naruto proceeded after interpreting that as her grudging consent. Working swiftly, his hands skillfully incorporated chakra into the scroll's protective seals. He got it in a matter of minutes and went back to his team. Iruka applauded their accomplishment when they returned to the starting point. But Sakura's voice echoed before Naruto had a chance to feel proud of himself. She yelled, "He was reckless the whole time," and gestured to Naruto. "If it weren't for us, he'd have messed everything up." Some of the other students whispered behind their hands as they laughed. Embarrassment burned in Naruto's face, but he remained silent. "At least Naruto's doing something useful," said a sharply interrupted voice. Everyone turned to watch Ino Yamanaka advance, her azure eyes blazing. "What did you do, Sakura? Besides complain?" Anger reddened Sakura's cheeks. "Why are you even defending him? Feeling sorry for the outcast?" Ino retorted, "Naruto doesn't need anyone's pity, he's better at this stuff than most of us. Maybe you should stop being so jealous of people who actually work hard." There was a noticeable tension between the two girls. Iruka swiftly stepped in and broke up the argument before Sakura could respond. Nevertheless, the harm was done. Standing in silence, Naruto felt the weight of the looks all around him tighten his chest. Naruto took his sealing scrolls and withdrew to a peaceful area of the academy grounds after the exercise. He used his finger to trace a pattern, attempting to become engrossed in the elaborate patterns. However, the recollection of Sakura's remarks persisted, piercing more deeply than he wished to acknowledge. "You're not really going to let her get to you, are you?" When Naruto looked up, Ino was standing over him with her hands on her hips. Without waiting for an invitation, she settled down next to him. Ino shrugged and said, "She's just mad because she can't admit you're better than her at this. Don't let it bother you." Naruto smiled at her a little, appreciatively. "Thanks, Ino. I'm just tired of being the one everyone laughs at." With firmness, Ino said, "Then stop worrying about them, you're not doing this for them. You're doing it for yourself. And for the people who actually matter." As her words took hold, Naruto nodded. "You're right, I'll just keep doing my best." "That's the spirit," Ino remarked, nudging him playfully. "And hey, if Sakura keeps being a pain, I'll handle her." With a sincere laugh, Naruto released the tension that had been building in his chest. He felt lighter for the first time that day. Sakura almost fell into a hidden pit trap during another exercise later that afternoon after misjudging a step. Instinctively, Naruto formed a quick seal to create a barrier and capture her. He said, careful, as he assisted her in returning to firm ground. "You could have gotten hurt." Sakura dismissed herself, a look of embarrassment and annoyance on her face. She yelled, "I didn't need your help," and stormed off without saying anything more. Ino shook her head, having seen the scene. "Unbelievable. Don't let her attitude get to you, Naruto." Naruto said, "I won't," but there was a hint of fatigue in his voice. Naruto sat at his desk in his tiny apartment that night, surrounded by incomplete notes and glowing seals. He mentally replayed the day's events, emphasizing Ino's support over Sakura's taunts. Her words gave him courage and served as a reminder that he wasn't viewed as a burden by everyone. Naruto muttered, "I'll prove them wrong," his determination growing stronger. "Not for them, but for me." The room was illuminated by the subtle glow of his seals as he worked, demonstrating his resolve to overcome the negativity and carve out his own route. The grass was still slick with dew, and the academy training grounds were silent in the early morning. Sitting cross-legged close to the field's edge, Naruto traced a seal he had drawn on a piece of parchment with his fingers. He infused the fuinjutsu with a tiny pulse of chakra, which caused the delicate patterns to glow faintly. The village's constant murmurs lingered in the back of his mind, despite his concentration. Despite the heavy shadow of loneliness, Naruto persisted, his determination unwavering. A voice behind him said, "You're improving, kid," breaking the calm silence. Naruto's hand automatically reached for a kunai as his head snapped up. A tall man with spiky white hair and a cheeky smile stood a few feet away. A massive scroll was fastened to his back, and his red cloak fluttered slightly in the wind. The man's presence was both commanding and strangely at ease, as though he simultaneously belonged everywhere and nowhere. With a steady voice despite his heart pounding, Naruto demanded, "Who are you?" The man's smile widened as he laughed. "Relax, kid, the name's Jiraiya, I'm just a wandering sage, and I couldn't help but notice the seals you were working on. You've got some talent there." Naruto furrowed his brow. "Jiraiya, wait, are you one of the legendary Sannin?" "The one and only," Jiraiya exclaimed, placing his hands on his hips in a flamboyant pose. "Now, what's a kid like you doing messing with seals like those?" "That's advanced stuff." Uncertain of how much to divulge, Naruto paused. "I've been studying them," he said warily. "Why do you care?" Jiraiya's smile changed from one of playfulness to one of seriousness. "Because fuinjutsu isn't something just anyone can pick up. It takes precision, dedication, and a hell of a lot of brains. Most people can't even scratch the surface, but you," he looked at the glowing seal. "You've already gone deeper than most Chunin ever will." A mixture of pride and suspicion filled Naruto's chest as he gazed down at the parchment he was holding. "Simply, I've been practicing," he stated. Jiraiya lowered himself to Naruto's level and scanned the seal with his keen eyes. "This style," he trailed off, his eyes darting to Naruto. "It's familiar. Almost like, very similar to Minato's work." As he looked at the boy more intently, a lump developed in Jiraiya's throat. There was no denying the similarity, the intense expression, the sharp blue eyes, the golden hair. He was staring at Minato Namikaze as a child, as if time had turned back on itself. However, there was more, something special. There was a loneliness about this boy that Jiraiya had never noticed in Minato. "Where did you learn this?" Jiraiya inquired, his voice now softer and tinged with curiosity as well as a deeper pain he was reluctant to identify. "From scrolls," Naruto replied, leaving the response ambiguous. He didn't want to tell someone he hardly knew about Danzo's involvement. After examining him for a while, Jiraiya got to her feet. He took out a small, worn notebook from inside his cloak and said, "Well, whatever the source, you've got potential, kid. And potential like that shouldn't go to waste. Here, consider it a gift." After a moment of hesitation, Naruto took the notebook. The book had a simple cover, but the pages were jam-packed with fuinjutsu-related notes, diagrams, and sketches. He turned the pages and asked, "What's this?" "Something that might help you take your skills to the next level," Jiraiya grinned. "Just be careful. Fuinjutsu is as dangerous as it is powerful. One wrong stroke, and you could blow yourself to pieces." Naruto studied the notebook, his eyes narrowing. "Why are you giving this to me? You don't even know me." A tiny, sly smile replaced Jiraiya's smirk. "Let's just say I see a bit of someone I used to know in you. Besides, you've got a spark, kid. The kind of spark that can change the world if it's nurtured right." Jiraiya turned a little as Naruto studied the notebook, his smile waning as he observed the boy. His chest constricted with a mixture of sadness and nostalgia as he thought, "He's so much like Minato it's uncanny. The same focus, the same resolve, and an intelligence that is as brilliant as Minato's was at all times. However, there is also a sense of melancholy and loneliness that Minato never experienced. The boy's talent is undeveloped and wild, but it is already brilliant. With the right direction, it has the potential to change the world." His mind raced, memories of Kushina and Minato suddenly surfacing. He could see Minato's steady, comforting smile and hear Kushina's ferocious laughter. Jiraiya thought, they would have been so proud of him. However, They ought to have been present. The weight of their absence struck him like a blow. They ought to have raised him. I ought to have been present. Jiraiya clenched his fists at his sides. He pushed past the guilt and forced himself to concentrate. This has nothing to do with what I didn't do. It has to do with what I can do right now. Naruto said softly, thanks, jolting Jiraiya out of his reverie. Jiraiya forced the weight in his heart aside and smiled once more. Don't mention it. Just promise me you won't blow anything up. Well, not unless you mean to. A rare moment of genuine warmth broke through Naruto's normally reserved demeanor, and he couldn't help but smile. I'll try. Good, Jiraiya said, standing up straight. After giving Naruto one last wave, the sage turned and left, leaving him with the notebook and a ton of questions. Now, keep at it. And who knows, maybe we'll run into each other again. Jiraiya's face darkened as he strolled through Konoha's peaceful streets. This must be Danzo's doing, he thought grimly. This degree of sealing expertise shouldn't be available to any academy student. However, why Naruto? His mind whirled with a mixture of mistrust and anxiety. I'll watch this kid, no matter what Danzo is planning. Being used as a pawn is not worthy of Minato's legacy. Jiraiya stopped in the shadows and turned back to give Naruto one last look. The boy's brow was already furrowed in concentration as he became absorbed in the notebook. Jiraiya thought, he'll need more than just skill to survive what's ahead. But he has a heart, which most people lack, and that could be crucial. With the notebook by his side, Naruto resumed his work as the sun rose higher in the sky. He experienced a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long time, a realization that he wasn't traveling alone. And Jiraiya watched with a contemplative gaze somewhere in the shadows. He thought, Minato, Kushina, your boy has a fire in him. I'll see to it that it burns brightly. The sharp, clear morning air carried the slight buzz of activity from the academy grounds. With his hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets, Naruto stood at the edge of the training field. As he watched his classmates arrive, their chatter and laughter a faint murmur in his ears, the weight of his responsibilities settled heavily on his shoulders. Their lives were free from the burdens of the truths he carried, and they moved with a grace he was unable to impart. The academy had turned into a contradictory place for Naruto. His skills in fuinjutsu and tactical thinking were far superior to those of his peers, allowing him to excel in ways that they could not. But that same genius distinguished him, erecting an imperceptible wall that kept him apart. He was more affected than he wanted to acknowledge by the rumors that followed him, the envious looks, and the outright animosity from some classmates, such as Sakura. Flashback. The second year. Naruto's second year at the academy was filled with challenges. He was pushed to his breaking point by juggling the demands of daily classes with the strict requirements of his covert training under Danzo. Naruto spent his evenings learning fuinjutsu scrolls and secret exercises that sharpened his accuracy and stealth, while his classmates studied the fundamentals of jutsu and sparring. After a long day at the academy, Naruto ended up in an underground training area one evening while Root watched over him. Danzo's voice was just as sharp as the kunai that Naruto was supposed to use. Perfection is your only option, Naruto. The village cannot afford mistakes. Naruto drew a containment seal with shaking hands while perspiration trickled from his brow. Under his weary eyes, the lines became hazy, but he persisted, sending chakra into the seal. He was emotionally and physically exhausted from the training. Even though he was aware of the significance of his role, the relentless pressure to perform left little opportunity for mistakes or for being a child. The strain was evident at the academy the following day. Naruto's aim failed him during a shuriken throwing exercise in class. His classmates' murmurs were piercing. He's supposed to be some kind of prodigy. Doesn't look like it. Naruto's hands were clenched. He compelled himself to ignore the jeers and concentrate. He inhaled deeply before hurling another shuriken, striking the target squarely in the middle. However, the joy was short-lived, as the contempt of his peers persisted, serving as a continual reminder that he would always be scrutinized regardless of his efforts. There were brief moments of light amid the difficulties. Ino and Shikamaru were placed on Naruto's team for a group strategy exercise. The partnership was tense at first because people were afraid to trust Naruto because of his reputation as a recluse. However, as they solved the issue, Naruto's rapid thinking and thorough analysis were evident. If we approach from the left, we can use the terrain to our advantage, Naruto proposed while making a crude map in the ground. Despite himself, Shikamaru was impressed and arched an eyebrow. Troublesome, but he's not wrong. Ino grinned, her faith in Naruto unflinching. Then let's do it. An important turning point was their accomplishment in the exercise. Naruto experienced a sense of companionship for the first time, a realization that he was not completely alone. Shikamaru's reluctant respect and Ino's support sowed the seeds of relationships that would eventually deepen. Getting back to the present. The exercise for the day was another fictitious mission intended to assess strategy and leadership. Naruto hardly noticed Iruka's instructions as they reverberated throughout the field. His thoughts were elsewhere, focused on the expectations that seemed to be getting heavier every day. His thoughts were filled with Danzo's words, "Every mission is a test of your worth." A cheerful voice called out to him, "Hey, Naruto," and jolted him out of his reverie. Her radiant smile pierced the mist in his thoughts as she jogged over. "You're spacing out again. What's up?" Naruto forced a smile that fell short of his eyes. "Nothing. Just thinking." Ino scowled as she studied him with her keen eyes. "You've been doing that a lot lately. What's really going on? You can tell me." Naruto paused, his need for connection struggling with the burden of secrecy. He looked around to make sure they were by themselves. He appeared to struggle with his thoughts for a moment before inhaling deeply. He said softly, "There's something I haven't told anyone, at the outset. Danzo, he's been training me in secret. Fuinjutsu, tactics, missions, things no one else knows about." A hint of bewilderment appeared on Ino's face as her eyes grew slightly wider. "Danzo?" she asked again, not recognizing the name. Naruto paused, apprehensive about disclosing so much information. However, he experienced a rare surge of trust as he met Ino's worried gaze. "He's someone high up in the village. He's been training me in secret, teaching me things no one else knows. Fuinjutsu, tactics, even missions. It's intense, and sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the weight of the village on my shoulders." As her hand moved to lightly rest on his arm, Ino's expression softened. "Naruto, I had no idea. That's such a huge burden for anyone, let alone you. Why didn't you say anything before?" Naruto's voice was hardly audible above a whisper as his throat constricted. "I didn't think anyone would understand. Or worse, they'd look at me differently." Ino's voice was firm but warm as she tightened her hold on his arm. "You're wrong about that. I'm here, Naruto. Whatever you're going through, you don't have to face it alone. You can trust me." Her words pierced the barriers he had erected around himself and struck him more forcefully than he had anticipated. The weight of his secrets began to ease, if only slightly, for the first time. "Thanks, Ino," he uttered, his voice breaking with suppressed emotion. "It means a lot, more than I can say." Ino grinned, her genuineness tempering her usual brightness. "You're not alone, Naruto. Never forget that." Naruto sat by himself in his apartment that night, with the dim light of a seal filling the space. With a steady hand he traced the patterns, his mind reliving the day's events and the difficulties of his sophomore year. He was starting to realize that his path wasn't about satisfying other people's expectations, even though those expectations might never go away. One step at a time, he had to figure out how to get there on his own. Naruto's determination strengthened as the night grew darker. He was more than a village tool or a legacy that needed to be carried out. He was Naruto Uzumaki, and he would carve out his own route that honored his parents, friends, and most importantly, himself. Ino had grown to be his closest confidant and pillar of support in a world full of hardships. The academy training field was covered in long shadows from the late afternoon sun, which illuminated the students' tense mood with its golden rays. The academy's last major exercise, a thorough assessment meant to gauge leadership, strategy, and teamwork, took place today. As Iruka Yumino spoke to the assembled students, Naruto Uzumaki stood at the field's edge, his piercing blue eyes sweeping the area. Iruka clarified, "This exercise will determine your readiness to graduate," in a firm yet supportive tone. "Each team must navigate through a forested course, retrieve a scroll guarded by traps, and return here without being caught by patrolling Chunin. Success will require coordination and a clear leader. Choose your leader wisely." As the students started to organize into groups, murmurs spread throughout the assembly. Naruto stayed motionless while observing his friends form recognizable coalitions. Some looked at him suspiciously, clearly distrustful. He was accustomed to it. His exceptionality had brought him as many critics as fans. Ino Yamanaka walked up to him with her usual assurance and determined, bright eyes. "Naruto, you're leading our team." Startled, Naruto blinked. "What? Why me?" "Because you're the smartest and most capable one here," Ino stated casually. "Shikamaru and Choji agree. Besides, you've already proven you're a leader." Naruto turned to see Choji smile encouragingly and Shikamaru nod lazily. The assistance was comforting but alien. He straightened and returned the nod. All right, let's do this. Dash. The sounds of distant birdsong and rustling leaves added to the tense atmosphere of the densely populated, poorly lit forest. Naruto led his team along a meticulously planned path, his senses keen. We'll avoid the main path, he said, crouching next to a map they had made in the ground before beginning. The patrols will expect us there. We'll circle around and approach the scroll's location from the west. Shikamaru muttered, troublesome, but he complied without protest. But logical. Naruto was flanked by Ino and Choji, who clearly trusted him to lead. Naruto abruptly stopped as they passed through the bushes and raised a hand. Trap ahead, he said in a whisper, gesturing to a thin wire that was dangling between two trees. He took out a tiny sealing tag and carefully fastened it to the wire. With a gentle click, the trap was disarmed after a chakra pulse. Impressed, Ino arched an eyebrow. That's some serious precision, she remarked. Naruto smiled slightly at her. Thanks, let's keep moving. Dash. The scroll was concealed in a clearing encircled by tripwires and a number of pits. Nearby, two Chunin were on patrol, their keen eyes scanning the surroundings. Naruto knelt down and motioned for his group to follow suit. Here's the plan, he muttered. Shikamaru, use your shadow possession jutsu to distract the guards. Ino, you'll take control of one and lead them away from the scroll. Choji, be ready to intercept if things go south. I'll go in and grab the scroll while they're distracted. The team trusted his judgment and nodded. Shikamaru made the first move, ensnaring one of the guards with his shadow as it moved across the ground. When Ino used her mind transfer jutsu, the Chunin stiffened and froze. Her body sagged as her awareness reached the guard, who started to move away, attracting the others' attention. Naruto moved silently and quickly as he darted into the clearing. When he got to the scroll, he swiftly broke the seals that kept it safe before putting it in his pouch. He froze when someone shouted. The second Chunin was returning to the clearing after noticing something wrong. Using his human boulder technique, Choji crashed into the guard, sending them sprawling. Naruto met his team at their rendezvous point by using the distraction to retreat back into the shadows. He said, "Got it," and held up the scroll. When Ino's body consciousness returned, she smiled. Nice work, team. Shikamaru sighed, but his lips were slightly pursed in a smile. Could have gone smoother, but not bad. As they returned to the academy, Naruto felt a surge of pride in his chest. He felt like he belonged for once. Dash. Iruka revealed the outcomes back at the academy. Team Naruto completed the course with exceptional strategy and coordination. Their leadership and execution were exemplary. Some of Naruto's classmates were impressed, while others were resentful. Sasuke's pride was obviously hurt by Naruto's success, as evidenced by his piercing gaze. Sakura avoided looking directly into Naruto's eyes, but her expression was unreadable. Well done, Naruto, Iruka said softly as she gave him the scroll. Your parents would be proud. Naruto took the compliment with a hard swallow and nodded. He experienced a glimmer of hope for the first time that he could overcome the burden of his past and the weight of expectations. Dash. Later that night, Naruto was sitting on his apartment's roof with the scroll next to him. The lights of the village twinkled beneath the glittering stars above. Despite the success of the day, a familiar sadness descended upon him. He was startled by Ino's question, still doubting yourself. He turned to see her, her face warm and playful, climbing up to join him. Not doubting, Naruto remarked, grinning slightly. Just thinking. With her shoulder grazing his, Ino settled down next to him. Well, think about this. You led us to victory today. You proved to everyone, even yourself, that you're more than they say you are. With a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, Naruto looked at her. Thanks, Ino, for everything. She smiled and gave him a playful prod. That's what friends are for. Now stop brooding and enjoy the moment, will you? With a laugh, Naruto released the tension in his chest. He let himself think that perhaps, just possibly, he was headed toward becoming the leader his parents and the village needed as they sat together beneath the stars. Morning sunlight spilled over the village walls, and the buzz of student conversation filled the academy training grounds. Under the shade of a tall tree, Naruto Uzumaki sat cross-legged, working hard to sketch out a complicated seal on a piece of parchment. Few people his age could match the level of accuracy shown by the faint lines of chakra glowing along the seal. However, the murmurs surrounding him weren't entirely admiring. One boy looked at Naruto from a distance and whispered to another, "Do you think he's really that good?" "I don't know," said the other. "He's just different." Despite hearing the words, Naruto remained silent and concentrated on the fine lines of his work. However, the well-known pain of loneliness tore at him on the inside. Whatever he accomplished, the distrust of the village persisted, looming large over his every move. Ino Yamanaka, who was nearby, observed him thoughtfully. As she heard the gossip, the annoyance in her eyes intensified. She finally got up and walked over to him, ignoring their classmates' interested looks. "Naruto, you should take a break. You've been at that for ages," she said, her voice piercing the commotion. Naruto raised his head and grinned slightly. "Just finishing this up." "What's up?" "What's up is that these idiots don't know what they're talking about," Ino said bluntly, pointing to the students who were engaging in gossip. "I don't get how they can look at what you're doing and not be impressed." Naruto's smile wavered a little, but he shrugged it off. "Doesn't matter. I'm not doing this for them." "Still," Ino remarked, softening her voice, "they're wrong. And one day, they'll see that." After the lessons for the day, Ino sat at home that evening, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the rumors and whispers about Naruto's treatment. She went up to her father, Inoichi Yamanaka, while he was reading a report at their dining table, unable to shake the questions. With hesitation, she said, "Dad, may I ask you something?" When Inoichi saw his daughter, his expression softened as he looked up. "Of course, Ino. What's on your mind?" With a tone of both curiosity and annoyance, Ino questioned, "Why do people treat Naruto the way they do? He's smart, talented, and works harder than anyone else in class. So why does everyone act like he doesn't belong?" With a slight furrow of his brow, Inoichi put the report down. After examining his daughter's face for a moment, he gave a thoughtful response. "Naruto's situation is complicated, Ino. Sometimes, people fear what they don't understand. And fear, when left unchecked, can turn into prejudice." Ino scowled. "But that's not fair. He hasn't done anything wrong." "You're right," Inoichi concurred. "It isn't fair. But fairness is not always something you can expect from people. What matters is how you choose to act. If you see someone being treated unfairly, stand by them. Show them that not everyone sees them that way." With a slow nod, Ino's determination solidified. "I will. Naruto deserves better than this." With a quiet smile, Inoichi showed pride. "I'm glad you think so, Ino. Remember, small acts of kindness can make a big difference." Sasuke Uchiha, meanwhile, stood close to the training dummies, his dark eyes narrowing as he lingered there, thinking about the lessons of the day. He may have once quietly admired Naruto's abilities, but that admiration had turned into something harsher. With his growing inferiority complex bearing down on him, Sasuke clenched his fists. "He's always showing off," Sasuke whispered to himself. His mind flashed to the picture of his brother Itachi's face, taunting, smirking. Just like him. Sakura Haruno, standing next to him, noticed where he was looking. She folded her arms and uttered, "Naruto. Showing off, please. He's just weird, why are you even paying attention to him?" Sasuke's eyes hardened and he did not respond. He knew in his heart that it wasn't that easy. No one their age could match Naruto's abilities. What's the worst? It took effort, not just skill. Sasuke relentlessly trained to establish his worth, but Naruto just outperformed. Iruka gathered the students for a strategy exercise the following day. Teams had to capture a flag that was protected by a number of obstacles and traps. While Naruto, Ino, and Shikamaru formed a team, Sasuke, Sakura, and another student formed another. The teams scattered into the training field when Iruka signaled. Naruto took the lead as his team swiftly came up with a plan. "The traps are probably focused around the obvious approaches," he remarked, gesturing to a hastily drawn map in the ground. "If we circle around and use this path, we can avoid most of them." "Sounds logical," Shikamaru shrugged lazily. "But what's the catch?" Naruto grinned. "No catch. Just trust me," Ino smiled. "I'm with you, Naruto." They coordinated flawlessly. Naruto used his Fuinjutsu to disarm a number of traps, and Ino's quick thinking and Shikamaru's shadow techniques dealt with the guards. They returned to the starting point after obtaining the flag in a matter of minutes. Iruka exclaimed, "Team Naruto has completed the exercise." In a proud tone. Naruto's peers whispered to each other. While some, like Sasuke, remained silent, their eyes turned away, others were obviously impressed. Ino stayed by Naruto's side as the students scattered, her voice full of enthusiasm. We crushed it out there. That plan of yours was genius. Naruto's cheeks were slightly flushed as he scratched the back of his head. Thanks, Ino. You guys made it work, though. Sasuke's fists clenched at his sides from afar. His jaw tightened as he abruptly turned away. Sakura, who was nearby, saw his response and quickly followed. She said, Sasuke, hold on. What's wrong? Sasuke said sharply, nothing, snapping. Just, leave me alone. As the sun began to set that evening, Naruto found himself standing on the rooftop of the academy, looking out over the village. The lingering pain of loneliness tempered the glow of his success in the day's exercise. He was tormented by the resentment of some of his classmates, which he felt like a physical burden. His thoughts were interrupted by Ino's voice, what's bothering you now? She was standing there with her arms crossed and a kind expression on her face when he turned around. She patiently waited for his answer while sitting next to him. Naruto finally said, nothing, but it sounded hollow. Just thinking. Ino rolled her eyes. You're always thinking. Come on, spill. After a moment of hesitation, Naruto sighed. It's just, no matter what I do, it feels like it's never enough. Even when we win, there's always someone who thinks I don't deserve it. Ino's eyes softened. That's their problem, not yours. You can't live your life trying to please people who don't want to see the truth. Naruto's face was unreadable as he gazed at her. And what if I want them to see it? Ino firmly stated. Then keep doing what you're doing, because one day, they won't have a choice but to acknowledge you. A tiny smile formed on Naruto's lips, and for a brief instant, the burden on his shoulders seemed to lessen. As the last of the sunlight faded into the night, they sat together in silence. The stacks of notes and scrolls strewn all around Naruto were streaked with gold as the early morning sun filtered through his small apartment. He sat on the floor with his legs crossed, staring at a complicated diagram of Fuinjutsu. The room was filled with the gentle hum of chakra that was infused into the seals. But his mind was elsewhere, caught up in the complex web of things he had learned from Danzo Shimura. In Naruto's life, Danzo had always been a man of contradictions. He was both a mentor and a specter to the boy, a person who had revealed his ancestry, given him the means to follow his own path, and yet weighed down his shoulders with the harsh realities of survival. The innumerable lessons that Danzo had taught Naruto were replayed in his mind as he followed the pattern of a containment seal. Flashback. As they stood in the dimly lit root training grounds, Danzo had said, "Power is not a gift, Naruto," in an icy and uncompromising tone. It is a tool, shaped and honed through sacrifice and secrecy. Strength alone will not protect Konoha, it is strategy and control that ensure its survival. With his tiny hands shaking, Naruto, who was only 9 years old at the time, had listened carefully while drawing the intricate designs of a seal under Danzo's careful supervision. He had questioned apprehensively, recalling Hiruzen's remarks regarding unity and compassion, but what about bonds? Danzo had narrowed his visible eye. Bonds are fragile, prone to manipulation and betrayal. Trust them only as far as they serve your mission. Remember, Naruto, the world is not shaped by idealists but by those who act, no matter the cost. Naruto let out a long breath as he returned to the present, feeling the weight of those words against his chest. Even when it ran counter to Hiruzen and Jiraiya's compassionate teachings, Danzo's ideology had led him. However, as Naruto grew older, he started to recognize Danzo's philosophical flaws. In contrast to the infrequent rays of light that Ino and his expanding circle of allies brought, the older man's emphasis on sacrifice and secrecy frequently felt oppressive. Naruto looked at a frayed scroll that lay next to him, a remnant of the Fuinjutsu of the Uzumaki clan. Jiraiya had given it to him, along with a journal that contained sophisticated methods and approaches. For Naruto, the two objects had taken on the role of anchors, serving as a constant reminder that power was more than a tool, it was a means to respect his parents' legacy and create his own. Flashback. Shortly after their first encounter, Naruto recalled one of Jiraiya's lessons on a peaceful evening in the forest. Attracted by the boy's unwavering will and undeveloped potential, the sage had started to visit him frequently. Jiraiya's sense of duty grew with each visit, a subdued effort to make up for his years away. Jiraiya eventually made the decision to actively assist Naruto in his studies, providing advice on both Fuinjutsu and the significance of his power. Jiraiya frequently found himself admiring Naruto's development while being troubled by the idea of how the boy's life might have turned out if he had intervened earlier. Silently, he carried that guilt, rebuilding what had been lost with every lesson. On one such night, Jiraiya had seen him struggle with a particularly complicated seal and then intervened. The thing about Fuinjutsu, Naruto, Jiraiya had said, crouching next to him, is that it's not just about control. It's about trust. In yourself, in your chakra, and in the people who rely on you. Naruto had scowled, but what if they don't trust me back? Jiraiya's face had become more serious, a rare change from his usually cheerful manner. You build that trust, little by little. Not everyone will see it right away, but the ones who matter will. Power isn't just about crushing your enemies, it's about protecting the people you care about. Naruto had been moved by Jiraiya's genuineness in her voice. It was more than just guidance. It was a pledge that someone cared about him enough to support him through his hardships and to keep coming back. That belief was crucial to Naruto. Recalling those words, Naruto's lips formed a thin line. Danzo frequently felt conflicted between Jiraiya's and the third Hokage's opposing compassion and his pragmatism. He had learned from Danzo how to operate covertly, to foresee treachery and strike before it happens. Hiruzen had given him a moral foundation by highlighting the importance of trust and the duty of leadership, while Jiraiya had taught him how to forge strong bonds and motivate loyalty via action. Their voices combined to create a sophisticated symphony that challenged Naruto to figure out how to move forward on his own. A knock on the door cut short his thoughts. Naruto, you've been hiding in there all day. Come on, we're training. Ino's voice exclaimed with joy. With a quiet laugh, Naruto stood up. His life had been illuminated by Ino's presence, which served as a constant reminder that he was not alone. Her steadfast faith in him frequently offset the skepticism engendered by years of seclusion and Danzo's strict direction. As Naruto and Ino engaged in a fluid and accurate sparring match, the sun was low in the sky. Ino's keen eyes followed Naruto everywhere, and her dexterity made him change and come up with new ideas. As they fought, Naruto briefly felt the burden of Danzo's lessons lessen and instead concentrated solely on their relationship. You're getting faster, said Ino, avoiding a well-placed blow. Naruto smiled and said, and you're still improving a lot, acknowledging her perseverance in spite of their disparate skill levels. Both of them collapsed onto the grass at the end of their session, exhausted but happy. Ino looked at Naruto as they gazed up at the sky. You're always thinking so much. What's on your mind? After hesitating, Naruto answered in a low voice. Danzo taught me a lot about power and control. But sometimes, I wonder if that's all there is. What if strength is about more than just winning? Ino's eyes softened. Strength is what you make it. It's not just about fighting or protecting, it's about the people who make it worth it. With the weight of her words bearing down on him, Naruto turned to face her. Moments like this served as a reminder of Danzo's motivation for fighting despite all of his survival lessons. For the ties that made the darkness bearable, not for dominance or power. Naruto's resolve solidified as the stars started to emerge. He would respect both aspects of his training, striking a balance between the light and the shadows. He would discover his actual strength in the interaction between the two. The stacks of scrolls, ink pots, and papers that had become Naruto's constant companions were illuminated by the morning sunlight streaming into his small apartment. The journal Jiraiya had given him more than a year ago was open in front of Naruto as he sat cross-legged on the wooden floor. Leaning forward, he meticulously traced the complex symbols of an array of Fuinjutsu. It felt different today. A sense of impending success pervaded the atmosphere. Naruto had found the journal confusing and annoying when Jiraiya had first given it to him. There were incomplete diagrams and seemingly disjointed concepts in the notes. However, Naruto had unraveled piece by piece over the course of the months. As the symbols connected, patterns and theories that suggested more sophisticated methods became apparent. The most surprising thing to him was how fast he had progressed, as if the information in the journal spoke to something deep inside of him. The framework for a teleportation technique, which was incomplete, unstable, and purely theoretical, appeared to be what he had discovered. The idea was hardly even mentioned in the journal. An ambitious dream by an unidentified author was hinted at in the notes, which only offered hazy concepts. Naruto nearly had to create a new formula from scratch in order to turn this fragment into something tangible. The seal needed an incredible amount of chakra, and even the smallest tests frequently left him exhausted for hours. After hours of concentration, Naruto's muscles were tense, so he stood and stretched. Alright, he rolled his shoulders and muttered. Let's see if this works. Naruto activated the array he had written on the ground and placed a kunai with a seal tag on the floor. The air appeared to tremble, and Naruto suddenly found himself on the other side of the room. His arrival was accompanied by a surge of erratic energy that knocked ink pots to the ground and rattled the desk. With his breath coming in sharp gasps, Naruto fell to one knee as his legs faltered. Despite the strain, a smile appeared on his face as he gasped, "It worked, sort of. But man, that's draining." He was startled out of his reverie by a knock on the door. When Naruto opened it, he saw Jiraiya leaning lazily against the frame with an oddly solemn expression. "I felt the chakra spike all the way across the village," Jiraiya remarked as she entered without waiting to be invited. "What in the world are you doing in here?" After a moment of hesitation, Naruto responded, his gaze darting to the seals strewn all over the floor. "I've been working on something, it's still not perfect, though." Curious, Jiraiya arched an eyebrow. "Alright, show me." With a reserved yet determined expression, Naruto nodded. To activate the array he had written on the ground, he took a step back. He concentrated, channeling a substantial amount of chakra into the seals. Naruto reappeared across the room as a flash of light seemed to ripple through the space. After that, there was a wild outburst of energy that rattled the furniture and left Naruto panting and on one knee, clearly exhausted. Jiraiya's eyes went wide with shock. He remained silent for a moment, staring at the location where Naruto had materialized. He was having trouble processing what he had just seen. The teleportation was a working prototype of something that should have been unattainable for anyone other than a seasoned Fuinjutsu master, not merely a crude imitation. Jiraiya considered this to be nothing less than miraculous. Naruto could never have imagined what he had accomplished. Such an endeavor would have required years of research and experimentation, even for an experienced Fuinjutsu master. Not only was the teleportation sophisticated, but its intricacy was godlike. In essence, Naruto had refined a concept that had otherwise died with Minato and rewritten the basic framework of a technique that Minato had spent years developing. Jiraiya's thoughts whirled. With such little knowledge, not even Minato could have accomplished this. This is unmatched genius, not just talent. How is it possible for a 12-year-old to have such wisdom? At last, Jiraiya managed to say, "You actually made it work," in a low, awe-tinged voice. In contrast to his typically relaxed manner, he strode over to the journal Naruto had been using and quickly turned through its pages. "Do you even realize what you've done?" Wiping perspiration from his brow, Naruto gazed up at Jiraiya, his voice composed despite his fatigue. "I'm still figuring it out. It's unstable and uses way too much chakra, but it's a start." Jiraiya put the journal down, his hands shaking a little. His mind was racing, flashing back to Minato's work and the years of mastery it required. "Naruto, this isn't just advanced Fuinjutsu. This is something entirely new. You've done what even the most brilliant minds of Konoha couldn't have imagined. Your father spent years perfecting the Hiraishin, but what you've created here, it's a step towards something equally revolutionary, and you did it from scraps of a forgotten idea." Naruto's eyes darted, but he remained silent, his introverted disposition protecting his thoughts. "The man who wrote this left behind a legacy," Jiraiya added cautiously. "Anyone who can continue where he left off faces a challenge. I didn't think anyone would figure this out so fast, not even you." Sitting back on the floor, Naruto's breathing became steady. "It's just, the seals make sense to me," he said quietly. "I'm not sure why, but they do." "You've done something remarkable, Naruto," Jiraiya said, his expression softening as he studied Naruto, the weight of unspoken truths hanging in the air. "However, this method is risky due to the instability and chakra cost. You must carefully refine it. Make a commitment to not overwork yourself." "I'll figure it out," Naruto said with a slight nod, his determination evident. "I still have a lot to learn." "You're already rising to the challenge," he said, more than I ever expected. Jiraiya continued to watch him, amazed by the silent resolve in the boy's eyes. With his body still recuperating from the strain, Naruto sat down among his scrolls as Jiraiya departed. The discovery of the journal filled him with a mixture of pride and resolve. He was not merely learning techniques, but carrying on the work of someone who had believed in the ability of Fuinjutsu to influence the future. As the sun began to set, Naruto went back to work, carefully modifying the seal to lower its chakra requirements. The teleportation was only the first step. he would continue to experiment, refine, and push the limits of what was feasible. As Naruto Uzumaki stood silently, his hands following the outline of a freshly drawn seal on the ground, the mist-shrouded early morning air hung heavy over the training grounds, and the faint hum of chakra emanating from his work reverberated through the air, a melody only he could hear. His expression was one of quiet focus, but his mind was whirling in the turbulence of recent challenges and revelations. Although Naruto's remarkable advancements in fuinjutsu and fighting skills were now indisputable, each new development brought with it new challenges. His teleportation technique, a crude but revolutionary prototype, was still a closely guarded secret that only Jiraiya knew about, and his mentor's shock had stayed with him, his warnings about the danger and responsibility of wielding such power echoing in his mind. Nevertheless, Naruto felt the indirect effects of his developing abilities, the awe of some peers, the resentment of others, and the jagged edge of Sasuke's desire. Sasuke's inferiority complex had reached a boiling point, and his accomplishments, which had previously been disregarded or ignored, had started to cast long shadows. Meanwhile, for the first time, Naruto was paired with Hinata and Shino in a training exercise, and their interactions were cautious but respectful, with each observing the other's strengths. Hinata, who was shy but determined, did her best to keep up, surprising Naruto with her quiet encouragement. Shino, who was always composed, provided shrewd tactics, acknowledging Naruto's strategic genius with a subtle nod. The trio's dynamic started to shift from formality to a tentative camaraderie, laying the foundation for connections Naruto hadn't expected amid the usual hostility he faced. When Iruka called the class together for an advanced tactical exercise that afternoon, a simulation in which teams had to outmaneuver each other and seize a target scroll, Naruto, Hinata, and Shino had rapidly come up with a plan to take advantage of the natural choke points in the terrain. Sasuke watched from the sidelines as their team outperformed the opposition, his fists clenched, his eyes never leaving Naruto, whose cool command of the battlefield stood in stark contrast to Sasuke's simmering intensity. Iruka complimented Naruto's leadership and performance at the end of the exercise, but rather than making him feel proud, the recognition made him feel even more alone. While the other students whispered about his skill, their voices were filled with suspicion and jealousy, and Sasuke's silence was the loudest of all. When Naruto got back to his apartment later that night, exhausted from the day's events, he was sitting among his scrolls when a sharp knock shattered the silence. Naruto opened the door to see Sasuke standing there, his face a mixture of desperation and rage. Sasuke abruptly said, "We need to talk," and entered without waiting for an invitation. "What's this about?" Naruto asked, his brows furrowed as he shut the door. With his dark eyes blazing, Sasuke turned to him and said, "Naruto, how do you do it? How do you maintain your strength?" The question took Naruto by surprise, and he blinked. "I train. Like you, I put in a lot of work." "It's not the same," Sasuke angrily said, raising his voice. "You surpass everyone. You don't just work hard. You are aware that you are different from the rest of us." Unsure of how to react, Naruto said, "I don't, I'm just trying to do what I can." "How about me? I've pushed myself to the limit, but no matter what I do, it's never enough," Sasuke demanded as he moved in closer. "Itachi first, then you. Why am I unable to catch up?" Naruto was moved by the unadulterated suffering in Sasuke's voice, but he was unsure of how to reassure him and close the growing distance between them. "Sasuke, it's not about catching up," he said. "There is no competition between us. Don't tell me lies. Everything is a competition," Sasuke yelled, his voice resonating throughout the tiny space. "And you continue to succeed." As his own annoyances boiled to the surface, Naruto's hands balled into fists at his sides. "Sasuke, I'm not trying to win. I'm attempting to live. Do you believe I requested this? None of it feels like winning. The pressure, the stares, the whispers." Sasuke turned away, his voice barely above a whisper, and said, "You don't understand what it's like to be in someone's shadow." Both of them felt the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on them as the room fell into tense silence. "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to be alone." Naruto's chest constricted. With stiff shoulders, Sasuke stopped at the door and said, "Then maybe we're not so different after all." After that, he left, leaving Naruto to think on his own. That night, as fatigue soaked into his bones, Naruto gazed at the complex seal he had been honing, a more stable version of his teleportation array, the lines and symbols fading before his eyes as Sasuke's words, Danzo's demands, and Jiraiya's warnings replayed in his mind. If having power only makes you a target, what good is it? Naruto muttered to himself, remembering Jiraiya's faith in him, Hiruzen's compassion lessons, and Ino's unwavering support. Their faith served as a lifeline, but the loneliness of being apart felt insurmountable. The following day, Ino discovered Naruto sitting in the academy's quiet courtyard, haphazardly drawing designs in the dirt with a twig. She watched him for a while before approaching and quietly settling down next to him. Startled but not irritated, Naruto glanced at her and said, "Hey," in a quiet, distant voice. "Hey yourself," Ino said, reclining on her hands. "So, what's the big mystery today? Fuinjutsu, life, or is Sasuke just being himself?" With a silent chuckle, Naruto lifted the corner of his mouth and said, "Something like that. Simply, attempting to solve the problem." "You know, you're allowed to stop thinking so hard," Ino said, gently nudging his shoulder. "I mean, it's acceptable to not know everything at this time." "Feels like everyone's waiting for me to mess up," Naruto said, pausing, staring at the crooked lines he had drawn. "Or worse, waiting for me to prove them right." "You're way too hard on yourself," Ino said, her voice gentle but tinged with an uncommon intensity. "Look, I understand. Even though you're under a lot of pressure, you don't have to bear it alone. You're Naruto. You underestimate your strength. You've also taken me by surprise several times. And believe me, I'm not easily impressed." After blinking and turning his head in her direction, Naruto said, "Thanks," in a quieter than usual voice. "I don't say it enough, but, really, thanks, Ino." Her words lingered in the air, their sincerity piercing the fog of self-doubt that had engulfed him. Ino's cheeks flushed a little, but she covered it with a playful smile. "That's what I'm here for," she said as her expression softened and she reached out impulsively, brushing a stray lock of hair from his face. The touch was fleeting but lingered between them, to prevent you from becoming a tragic lone wolf. "Well, I guess I should start listening to the smart people around me, huh?" Naruto said with a laugh that was lighter than anything he had made in days. With a playful grin, Ino said, "Finally, you're catching on," as she stood up and brushed off her skirt. "But seriously, Naruto, you're not as alone in this as you think," she said, holding out her hand. "Remember that, please." After a brief pause, Naruto took her hand and said, "Thank you, Ino. I mean it." She quickly covered it up with her typical bluster. "All right, enough cheesy stuff," she said, her cheeks warming slightly. "Wake up, we have tasks to complete." Ino cleared her throat and turned away, but Naruto noticed her slight blush as he allowed himself to be pulled to his feet, his grip lasting just a heartbeat too long. Stretching his arms, he said, "Okay, but don't think I'll let you win at whatever you've got planned." "Win?" Over her shoulder, Ino smirked and said, "Oh, Naruto, I'll leave you in the dust." Naruto felt the burden on his shoulders slightly lessen as they strolled away together, their light-hearted banter cutting through the peaceful courtyard. Although neither of them expressed it directly, their bond deepened, a steady, comforting presence in an otherwise turbulent world. Naruto was more than just a prodigy, he was a protector, a legacy bearer, and a future leader. The cost of his brilliance was high, but he decided to bear it with purpose as the sun began to set. The lines flowed under his brush with renewed clarity as he sat down at his desk to refine the teleportation seal once more. For Naruto, the price of genius was high, but every step was worthwhile because of what he could accomplish and who he could become. For many of the students of the Hidden Leaf Village, today was the culmination of years of hard work, training, and struggle. For Naruto Uzumaki, however, it was another step forward in his extraordinary journey, a day that carried the weight of expectations and the hope of something greater. The academy was buzzing with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Naruto stood near the back, his hands in his jacket pockets, as the students gathered in the main hall of the academy, their voices a low hum of anticipation. His keen blue eyes scanned the crowd, recognizing familiar faces of his peers, and many looked at him with a mixture of awe, envy, and caution. The room fell silent as their unwavering teacher, Iruka Umino, took the stage. "Today," he said in a steady, kind voice, "you graduate from the academy and take your first steps as shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village. You've all demonstrated the perseverance and talent required to earn your spot here. We also acknowledge your efforts today." Iruka called each student to the stage individually, and Sasuke Uchiha strode forward with the tiniest smirk on his lips. Sakura Haruno trailed behind, her eyes darting anxiously between Sasuke and the audience, and Ino Yamanaka's turn made her face light up as she winked at Naruto as she made her way back to her seat. At last, Naruto's name was called, and as he stepped forward, the room seemed to hold its breath. Iruka's voice carried a note of pride as he said, "Naruto Uzumaki, for exceptional skill and leadership, you were promoted directly to Chunin." Whispers echoed among the students. The hall erupted into murmurs of incredulity, and Naruto could feel their eyes staring at him, some amazed, others doubtful. He took the headband from Iruka, his expression composed despite the gravity of the situation, and as he went back to his seat, he saw Shikamaru's sluggish nod of approval and Ino's beaming smile. Danzo Shimura had carefully planned the event, which was discussed in secret council meetings, even though Naruto was not aware of the conversations that led to his promotion. A flashback. There was a skepticism in the air as the council chamber was filled with heated voices during the heated debate over Naruto Uzumaki's promotion. The room was dimly lit. "This is insane. We are discussing the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails," cried an elder, slamming a hand on the table. "You want to promote a boy who poses the biggest threat this village has ever encountered." With a piercing and uncompromising tone, Danzo shot back, "And yet he has proven himself time and again, stating that he has executed missions with greater accuracy and inventiveness than his contemporaries. He is invaluable due to his fuinjutsu skills alone. Konoha would be weakened if such talent were ignored. Vital. He's a walking disaster," another elder yelled. "The village might be destroyed if the Nine Tails take over. How can we take the chance of giving him a position of power?" Danzo retorted, "The boy has demonstrated remarkable control over his chakra. His training under my guidance has ensured he can manage the burden of his power. He is also a great asset because of his strategic thinking and capacity to foster loyalty. Encourage allegiance. What loyalty can a Jinchuriki command when half the village still views him as a demon?" scoffed an elder. With a calm but authoritative voice, Hiruzen Sarutobi raised a hand to silence the commotion, saying, "Danzo, you argue for his potential. However, the issues brought up here are legitimate. What guarantees do we have that Naruto won't crumble under the pressure of this duty?" "No assurance exists in the shinobi world, Hiruzen," Danzo said, his expression tightening and briefly displaying an almost introspective quality. "However, I've witnessed the boy's determination. He acts out of a desire to prove himself, not just out of obligation. Most people don't realize how strong he is because of his training-tempered drive." "Strong, yes," a reluctant elder acknowledged, "but strength alone does not ensure loyalty or control." "He is not a liability," Danzo said, his tone growing icier. "He is a weapon, and this village can use him to its advantage. He does not give in to arrogance or carelessness like others do. It is impossible to question his commitment to defending Konoha, even if you have doubts about his compassion. And if he becomes weak due to his compassion," an additional elder pressed. "Compassion can be a flaw, but in Naruto's case, it has earned him the trust of peers like Shikamaru Nara and Ino Yamanaka," Danzo said, narrowing his visible eye. "He is uniquely qualified to lead because of that trust, even if his approaches deviate from what you consider conventional." Hiruzen studied Danzo, his eyes narrowing as he steepled his fingers thoughtfully. For years, the older shinobi had argued for caution and control, seldom offering assistance to people unless it was necessary, so Hiruzen found this abrupt defense of Naruto to be out of character. Hiruzen said in a measured tone, "Danzo, your words carry conviction, but I can't help but wonder why you've taken such an intense interest in Naruto. It almost seems personal that you believe in his potential." "I act only in Konoha's best interest," Danzo said, his voice remaining calm despite a slight hardening of his visible eye. "Naruto is an invaluable asset because of his skills and the discipline I have taught him. Ignoring that would be foolish." Hiruzen's gaze remained unwavering, but the knowledge that Danzo had secretly trained Naruto caused a flicker of anger that he seldom let come to the surface. He had always considered Naruto to be a surrogate grandchild, a boy he had vowed to care for and protect, and the idea of Danzo's shadowy influence influencing Naruto's development felt like a betrayal of that relationship. "Danzo, you've secretly trained him. Why wasn't I told?" Hiruzen asked in a calm voice, but there was a sharp intensity in his eyes. Unfazed, Danzo said, "Because it was necessary. The typical academy curriculum would have wasted the boy's potential, which required refinement. My strategies made sure he got the instruction he required to capitalize on his special talents." Hiruzen tightened his voice and said, "Your methods have always prioritized control over understanding." He lowered his voice and leaned forward slightly, saying, "Do not think for a moment that I've forgotten the cost of your necessary actions. Naruto is not a weapon to be honed in the shadows. As a child of this village, he should be guided and treated with kindness rather than manipulation." While his voice remained steady, Danzo's visible eye narrowed. Hokage-sama, you talk about compassion, but that won't keep Konoha safe. I gave the boy the discipline he needed because of his talent. He is now prepared as an asset rather than a liability because of this. The council room fell silent as the Hokage's simmering rage became apparent. You've taken liberties you were not granted, Danzo, Hiruzen said, clenching his hands tightly in a rare display of frustration that broke through his normally composed demeanor. What's done, however, is done. It won't be under your shadow alone if Naruto is to bear this load. He will be observed and his development appropriately directed. Danzo, you have been training him covertly. Why do you think he's prepared for this role? The council was filled with a murmur. An elder raised their voice in a doubtful tone. He's still a child. How can we entrust him with a Chunin's responsibilities? Danzo's eyes hardened. The boy is not just a child. He is a genius of rare caliber, excelling in ways even seasoned shinobi would envy. His mastery of fuinjutsu rivals that of advanced practitioners, and his ability to analyze and adapt under pressure is unparalleled among his peers. During missions, his actions reflect strategic insight and a natural aptitude for leadership. To waste his potential would be a disservice to Konoha. Danzo, your reasoning is clear, Hiruzen said, raising a hand to cut off the murmurs. However, the significance of such a promotion is enormous. In addition, Naruto needs to show that he is a leader and can motivate others. Can he overcome this obstacle? Danzo's face changed slightly, a brief pause showing a hint of reflection. Naruto has developed in ways that many people do not notice. He has a unique ability to inspire loyalty among his peers, which I cannot deny, even though I believe that compassion can be a dangerous weakness. Because of this, he is effective in a way that I had not previously considered. Even among seasoned shinobi, he is a weapon that can command trust. His relationships with some peers, such as Ino Yamanaka and Shikamaru Nara, demonstrate his capacity to cultivate loyalty and trust. He is already a leader, even though the village doesn't realize it yet. Give him this chance, and he'll be up to the challenge. Very well, Hiruzen said, nodding after a long silence. We'll keep a careful eye on his development. Naruto Uzumaki will be elevated to the rank of Chunin. The end of the flashback. After a journey that had been anything but typical, Naruto found himself on the rooftop of the academy that evening, the village below glowing softly in the golden light of the setting sun, leaning against the railing with the weight of the day resting heavily on his shoulders. Again lost in contemplation, his reverie was interrupted by Ino's voice. She came over with her typical enthusiasm, though her smile was a little softer than usual. Always, Naruto said, turning with a tiny smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. It feels different today. Of course it's different, Ino said with a curious tilt of her head. You were promoted to Chunin after completely ignoring Genin. Naruto, that's enormous. Why do you seem to take it so seriously? I don't know, Naruto said with a quiet laugh while scratching the back of his head. I suppose I'm just reflecting on everything that came before this. The village, my parents, everything. Your parents? Ino asked, her ears perking up. Oh, there's no way you'll escape this one. Who were they? Furthermore, don't even attempt to claim that it's complicated. I mean, it is complicated, Naruto said, blinking at her intensity. With a hand gesture, Ino interrupted him, saying, Nope. I'm looking for answers. How did they look? Were they shinobi? Did you learn fuinjutsu from them? Let it spill. Okay, Naruto sighed, unable to contain the slight smile that was tugging at his lips. You realize how unrelenting you are. It's one of my best qualities, Ino said with a smirk and crossed her arms. Talk now. After a brief pause, Naruto said softly, my dad was the fourth Hokage. Ino's mouth dropped as she froze. Wait, what? The fourth Hokage was your father? Naruto, that's incredible. She exclaimed, her hands flying to her cheeks as she gazed at him with wide eyes. And your mother? She belonged to the clan of Uzumaki. I learned my fuinjutsu from that, Naruto clarified. As she moved closer, Ino's surprise turned into something more affectionate. Naruto, that's amazing. Your parents were legendary, and all this time, you've been keeping that to yourself. It's easier if people don't know, Naruto said quietly, shrugging. When they do, things get a little complicated. Most people wouldn't even trust me. Well, I believe you, Ino said, placing her hands on her hips and speaking in a gentle yet firm tone. Additionally, you shouldn't have to carry something like that by yourself. Naruto, you've done a fantastic job, and I'm proud of you. Naruto's reticent smile softened as her words resonated. Thanks, Ino. That means a lot to me. Your secret's safe with me, she said with a smile and slightly flushed cheeks. I'll tell you what, though, this only makes you more awesome. You have a certain air of a mysterious hero. A small laugh escaped Naruto's lips as his smile grew. I don't know about that, but, he said. With her playful tone back, Ino leaned on the railing next to him and said, don't think this means I'm going to go easy on you, though. Someone needs to keep you alert because you're still Naruto. With a laugh, Naruto said, wouldn't expect anything less. As the village lights twinkled below, the two stood together, the warmth of their mutual trust enveloping them. For Naruto, it felt like the start of something stronger and new. When Naruto got back to his apartment, the village's calmness enveloped him like a cozy blanket, and the dim light from the streetlights outside filtered through his window, creating subtle patterns on the walls. Naruto sat at his desk, surrounded by ink and scrolls, and he exhaled slowly, a tiny smile appearing on his lips. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone on his journey. Naruto picked up a blank scroll with renewed determination, the faint glow of his Fuinjutsu experiments illuminating his workspace. The day's events replayed in his mind. The disbelief of his peers, the encouraging words from Ino, and the warm sense of trust that had begun to grow. Even though the future was still unclear, Naruto's heart was steady as he leaned over the parchment. Today was more than just a step forward, it was a reminder of the strength he possessed, both from the bonds he was creating and from his parents' legacy. For the first time in years, Naruto felt prepared to meet the stars outside, which sparkled like little promises. The streets of Konoha were alive with conjecture and rumors regarding Naruto Uzumaki the day following the graduation ceremony. Naruto had been promoted straight to Chunin, in contrast to his peers who had been placed in conventional genin teams. He was still unsure of the specifics of his role, but he stood out from his peers due to the attention he received, both positive and negative. With open scrolls and ink pots all around him, Naruto sat cross-legged in the middle of his apartment. The announcement of the day weighed heavily on him. After years of fighting for recognition, he now faced new difficulties and obligations. His thoughts were interrupted by a gentle knock. When Naruto got up and opened the door, he saw Ino Yamanaka standing there with her customary assurance but with a hint of worry. She teased, "Don't tell me you're sulking already," but her tone was softer than usual. "You just got promoted, and the whole village is talking about it. You should be celebrating." Naruto moved aside to let her in. With a sigh, he combed through his untidy hair. It doesn't feel like something to celebrate. Being a Chunin isn't just about a title. There are expectations now, things I can't mess up. Ino crossed her arms and collapsed onto his shabby couch. And when have you ever messed up? You've been handling more than anyone else for years, Naruto. This is just one more step forward. A small smile flickered across Naruto's lips. Thanks, Ino. You always know how to put things into perspective. She smiled. That's what I'm here for. Now, come on, show me what you're working on. After hesitating, Naruto pointed to the collection of scrolls arranged on the ground. I've been refining a new seal. It's complicated. Too much chakra, not enough precision. Ino squatted next to him, examining the elaborate designs. You're really something, you know that. Most of us are still trying to perfect basic techniques, and here you are, pushing the limits. Naruto gave a quiet laugh. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. But it's something that helps me focus. Naruto faced Hiruzen Sarutobi in the Hokage's office the following morning. With pride and caution, the third Hokage looked at him. Naruto, Hiruzen began in a steady voice, you've been promoted because of your exceptional abilities and leadership potential. However, your role will not be traditional. Instead of being assigned to a team, you will be placed under Jiraiya's supervision. He will guide you in missions and advanced training, ensuring you develop the skills necessary to fulfill your potential. This arrangement comes with unique responsibilities and challenges. Are you prepared for that? Naruto stood up straight, his eyes unblinking. Yes, Lord Hokage, I won't let you down. Hiruzen's face softened a little. Good. For your first mission, you'll need to find Jiraiya and receive the details directly from him. This will be your first time seeking him out, so consider it part of your training to locate him. He's likely somewhere in the village. Start with the bathhouses, knowing his habits, Hiruzen said with a small grin. Good luck, Naruto. Quote. The other academy graduates gathered to hear their team placements in the meantime. As Iruka read the assignments, his voice could be heard over the commotion. Team 7. Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Sai. Your Jonin leader will be Kakashi Hatake. Sakura felt excited, but Sasuke's expression remained stoic. Sai, the reserved and perceptive newcomer, just nodded. With a playful nudge, Ino smiled and said, Team 10, Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi. Your Jonin leader will be Asuma Sarutobi. Shikamaru sighed in mock protest, and Choji smiled warmly. Team 8, Kiba Inuzuka, Hinata Hyuga, and Shino Aburame. Your Jonin leader will be Kurenai Yuhi. The three assembled, their relationships just beginning to take shape as Kiba's raucous enthusiasm stood in stark contrast to Shino's composed manner and Hinata's quiet resolve. Iruka said, Naruto Uzumaki has been promoted directly to Chunin. For now, he will operate independently, but as missions arise, he may collaborate with different teams based on the village's needs. His responsibilities will be different, but his contributions to the village will be no less vital. Whispers of amazement and incredulity filled the room. Kiba whispered loudly enough to be heard as she leaned closer to Hinata. Chunin already? Naruto's really been holding out on us, huh? She stammered, her cheeks flushed, and Naruto's very talented. He's worked hard. Shino gave a quiet nod. It is unusual, but perhaps his skills warranted it. We should reserve judgment until we see him in action. Sasuke crossed his arms and his jaw tensed. Figures. They'd promote him for no reason. What has he done to deserve it? Sakura's face flushed as she looked at Sasuke. In an attempt to calm Sasuke, she said, well, Naruto's, I guess he's been lucky with opportunities. Maybe the Hokage sees something in him we don't. With a forced casualness. Like a kunai, Ino's voice broke through the whispers. She gave Sasuke a sharp look, and he returned the glare. Seriously, Sakura, lucky. Naruto's the hardest worker I know. He doesn't sit around expecting things to be handed to him just because of his name. With his pride clearly bruised, Sasuke stepped forward and yelled, what did you say? With her hands on her hips, Ino refused to back down. You heard me, Uchiha. Maybe if you stopped brooding for 5 seconds, you'd see that Naruto earned this. You could even learn a thing or two from him. Even she was taken aback by what she said, a strange warmth rising in her chest as she stood up for him. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she brushed it off as pride for a friend. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow in recognition but remained silent, dismissing it as yet another, troublesome, development. Stepping forward, Sasuke yelled, what did you say? Without flinching, Ino met his gaze while folding her arms. You heard me. Naruto's earned this. Maybe instead of sulking, you should try learning from him. Kiba leaned in Shikamaru's direction and grinned. This is getting spicy, he muttered. Think Sasuke's gonna blow a gasket. Shikamaru ran a hand through his hair and sighed. Troublesome. Can't they all just let it go? Choji shrugged and munched on a handful of chips nearby. I think Ino's got this. She's not going to let them talk down about Naruto. Iruka silenced the room with a loud clearing of his throat. That's enough. This is a moment to celebrate your progress as shinobi. Focus on your own paths instead of criticizing others. Sasuke's jaw was still clenched, but the graduates fell silent. Ino smiled slightly at Naruto's missing spot, her pride in him unaffected by the disturbance. Once more, that weird warmth flickered, but she dismissed it, thinking it was just admiration. She whispered, almost to herself, he's just proving everyone wrong. With his eyes searching for Jiraiya, Naruto meandered through Konoha's streets. Finding his new mentor and learning the specifics of his mission was the Hokage's first assignment for him as a Chunin. The bathhouses, which Hiruzen had indicated might be Jiraiya's most likely hangout, were the destination of the search. Indeed, Naruto saw the tall, white-haired sage crouching suspiciously close to the women's section after navigating through a throng of frustrated bathhouse employees who were shaking their heads. His face was plastered with a smile that could have split his cheeks, and his hand hovered over a tiny, perfectly round hole in the wall. Jiraiya-sensei, Naruto exclaimed, startling the man in the middle of his glance. Jiraiya lost his balance and fell into a pile of buckets, toppling them with a clatter as he flailed comically, his arms windmilling. A bar of soap flew through the opening, just missing his head, and a few women on the other side of the wall let out angry screams. Jiraiya scrambled to his feet and pretended not to care as he brushed off dirt. Ah, Naruto, perfect timing. I was just, inspecting the structural integrity of the bathhouse walls. Very important shinobi work. Naruto's doubtful expression said it all. Naruto deadpanned and folded his arms. Right, Because poking a hole in the women's bathhouse is exactly what a responsible shinobi does, he said. I should call you the pervy sage. A bead of sweat trickled down Jiraiya's temple as he froze, and then he laughed nervously. Pervy sage, what kind of nickname is that? Show some respect for your teacher. It's all part of my research. You wouldn't understand the complexities of a writer's life. Naruto's arms were crossed. I think I understand plenty. Hokage-sama said you'd give me the mission details. Unless your research is more important. Jiraiya's smile persisted, but his face changed to one of seriousness. That's right, your first mission is a chunin. Follow me, we'll discuss it somewhere more private. After a brief stroll, they took a seat under a peaceful tree close to the village's edge. With an uncommon gravity in his voice, Jiraiya gave Naruto a scroll. Your mission is to gather intel on reported rogue activity near the western border. Avoid confrontation unless absolutely necessary. The goal is to observe and report back. With unwavering resolve, Naruto took the scroll. Got it, Jiraiya-sensei. Jiraiya's typical smile reappeared as Naruto got up to go. Remember, kid, being a chunin is about more than just completing missions. It's about growing into the kind of shinobi others can rely on. No pressure, though. Naruto grinned. I've got this. Jiraiya laughed and shook his head as he watched him leave. The kid's got potential, and a lot to learn. But maybe I'll start with teaching him to respect the masterful art of research. Naruto was put to the test in unexpected ways during the mission. 5 long days passed in the thick forests close to the border, where every sound seemed louder and every shadow a possible danger. Although he had been trained by Danzo to be observant and stealthy, the reality of working alone presented new difficulties. Naruto discovered the small group of rogue shinobi operating out of a secret camp after days of diligent observation. He set traps around their perimeter with his fuinjutsu, making sure that any attempt to move their operations would be stopped. He felt a peculiar mixture of pride and discomfort as he observed from a hiding place. He realized for the first time how alone his role was. After almost a week away, Naruto returned to Konoha and submitted his report to Hiruzen. The Hokage nodded his approval, a silent testament to a job well done. But what really cheered him up was the kind smile Ino gave him when she saw him at the training grounds. How'd it go? She inquired, her voice bright but full of sincere interest. And how'd you like being a one-man cell? Mission accomplished, Naruto said, grinning slightly. But it's weird, being out there alone. The silence gets to you after a while, like every sound is too loud, and every shadow feels like it's watching you. It makes you realize how much having people around, friends, teammates, makes everything feel safer and more real. Makes you appreciate having people to come back to. Speaking of teams, he said, cocking his head, how's yours? Did you guys get any missions yet? Ino's face grew softer. Well, don't forget you're not really alone. You've got us, Naruto. And yeah, my team's been busy. Asuma-sensei had us help an old lady find her missing cat on our first mission. She sighed and smiled broadly. I guess even legendary Ino Shika Cho trios have to start somewhere. Naruto laughed. A cat mission, huh? Sounds like a blast. Oh, it was, Ino mockingly retorted. She gave him a light arm punch and smiled, her words more powerful than she realized. But you know what? Even chasing that cat, it felt good having Shikamaru and Choji there. You'll see, Naruto, even if you're solo now, you're never really alone. That's why we believe in you. Just don't let it go to your head, alright? With a nod, Naruto felt a little less pressure on his shoulders. Thanks, Ino. Naruto smiled as he barely avoided Ino's sweeping kick during their afternoon spar. You're getting faster, he teased, taking a step back and launching a swift jab that Ino easily sidestepped. And you're still predictable, Ino shot back, grinning, moving fluidly as she pushed forward. Come on, Naruto, is this all a chunin can do? With a laugh, Naruto spun to dodge her next blow. I'm holding back, wouldn't want to embarrass you. Ha, like that's ever going to happen, Ino shot back, her smile growing as their conversation accelerated. The sparring went on, with each move strengthening their friendship as lighthearted banter blended with hard work. When they finally stopped, they were both out of breath but smiling. Naruto experienced a revitalized sense of purpose. Even though his one-man cell role was intimidating, he knew he could overcome the obstacles because of these bonds. Naruto and Jiraiya stood in silent concentration as the training ground was bathed in a warm, golden glow from the midday sun. They had spent hours honing their skills, as evidenced by the scattered scrolls, ink pots, and kunai. Sasuke Uchiha stood undetected in the shade of surrounding trees, watching with narrowed dark eyes. Jiraiya wiped a drop of perspiration from his brow and said, "All right, kid. Your seals are solid, but let's not neglect the basics. Let's figure out your chakra affinities before we move forward." Naruto nodded, a nervous energy concealed by his quiet manner. Jiraiya gave him a tiny piece of paper with chakras on it, instructing, "Just channel a bit of chakra into this." Naruto concentrated, and the paper responded right away. One side sparked with electric energy, the other crinkled sharply. Jiraiya raised her eyebrows. "Wind and lightning. Kid, do you know how rare that is?" With a contemplative expression, Naruto gazed at the paper. "Is that good?" "Good." Jiraiya laughed loudly. "Naruto, having two affinities is practically unheard of. Your dad was a wind user, but adding lightning into the mix. That's something special. We're going to make the most of this." Jiraiya lowered himself, his voice becoming softer. "Your dad would be proud, you know. He was brilliant, just like you. And your mom, she'd have been the first to tell me not to work you too hard." Naruto's voice was hardly audible above a whisper as his eyes lingered on the ground. "You think so?" After a brief pause, Jiraiya resumed her speech. "You know, kid, your dad, Minato Namikaze, he was a wind user too. The yellow flash wasn't just about speed, it was about precision and strategy. And you're showing the same spark." With a steady but unsurprised expression, Naruto's head snapped up. "I know," was all he said. Astonished, Jiraiya blinked. "You know. Wait, how do you know about Minato?" Naruto shrugged, maintaining his reserved manner. "Danzo told me a while back. He said I should understand my legacy, even if I couldn't share it." Jiraiya's expression darkened a bit. His voice softened once more as he examined Naruto closely. "Danzo, huh, that explains a lot. And your mom, did he tell you about her too?" Naruto gave a nod. "Kushina Uzumaki. That's where my Fuinjutsu skills come from." With a mixture of pride and discomfort on his face, Jiraiya leaned back. "You've been carrying a lot on your own, haven't you?" Naruto smiled slightly, a rare vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "I'm used to it." Naruto's smile faded into something more sincere as Jiraiya put a hand on his shoulder. "I know so. You've got their determination and their heart. You're going to do great things, kid." Naruto nodded slightly, keeping his feelings to himself due to his introverted personality. "Thanks, pervy sage, I'll do my best." Jiraiya's teasing tone returned as his smile grew. "You know, kid, do you ever plan on calling me something other than pervy sage?" Naruto pretended to think deeply as he cocked his head. Nope." Jiraiya let out a loud moan and raised his hands. "You're killing me, Naruto. All this talent and not a shred of respect for your poor old master." A rare smirk appeared on Naruto's lips. "Well, maybe if you stop spying on bathhouses, I'll think about it." Jiraiya pointed a finger at Naruto and gasped in mock indignation. "That's research. You'll understand someday, you ungrateful brat." Naruto shook his head and gave a quiet laugh before returning to his training. Jiraiya put his hands together in a clap as the tender moment ended. "All right, enough of that. Let's see you handle lightning." Jiraiya summoned crackling energy into his palm to demonstrate a simple lightning technique. Sparks flew from Naruto's fingers as he imitated the hand signals. His initial attempts were awkward, but the electrical arcs became more stable in a matter of minutes. Jiraiya said, "Good," and nodded. "Now combine that with your wind chakra. It'll be tricky, but if anyone can figure it out, it's you." Naruto knelt and used wind chakra to create a kunai, which he then covered with lightning. With a high-pitched hum, the weapon sliced through the air as he threw it, embedding itself into a boulder. The rock broke into pieces as the combined energy exploded a moment later. Jiraiya whistled quietly. "You're a natural, Naruto. That's not just talent, that's genius." A slight smile formed on Naruto's lips, but he refrained from reveling in the compliment due to his reserved demeanor. "Thanks, pervy sage. I still have a lot to figure out, especially about what being their son really means." His smile came back as Jiraiya put a hand on his shoulder. "Kid, you're doing more than figuring it out. You're building something they'd both be proud of. One step at a time, yeah." Sasuke watched the training from the shadows, his Sharingan flickering to life. His eyes followed Naruto's every move, examining the combination of affinities, the precise hand signals, and the chakra flow. He was uneasy about what he saw. The remaining training dummies were disarmed when Naruto threw another wind-infused kunai, this time creating a controlled vortex. The crackling energy arced across the ground like a living force as he followed it with a strike enhanced by lightning. There was no denying the demonstration of control and skill. Sasuke, however, felt something darker stirred by the sight. Everything about Naruto's skill and accuracy seemed too familiar. The way Jiraiya complimented Naruto and the way he moved were reminiscent of how people used to talk about Itachi. Sasuke's mind swirled, and his fists clenched. This has nothing to do with Naruto outperforming me. This is about him turning into another Itachi, a prodigy who makes me feel insignificant and leaves me in the dust. It was obvious how far apart they were. Naruto's development went beyond rumors of his fuinjutsu skill to include ninjutsu that could compete with even the most experienced shinobi. Sasuke was tormented by the realization, which fueled his simmering rage and frustration. Sasuke turned away as Jiraiya complimented Naruto's efforts, his mind racing. His mind was consumed by the memory of Naruto's skill, displayed with such ease. "You were weak," Itachi said in a mocking voice that he could almost hear. "You're not hateful." Naruto had turned into another Itachi to Sasuke, a reminder of his own shortcomings and what he had lost. Itachi's anger was only heightened by the way Jiraiya's remarks echoed the compliments he had previously received. It was a blur, the walk back to his clan's compound. Sasuke was filled with self-doubt and questions. How did this occur? At what point did Naruto gain the ability to tower over me? His appetite for power was fueled by the pressure of his inferiority complex. However, it was more than just Itachi this time. He wanted to show the world and himself that he was more than just a shadow. Sasuke sat by himself under a tree in the Uchiha district as evening drew near, mentally reliving the scene with his Sharingan still active. He remembered every move and technique, but Jiraiya's description of Naruto was particularly noteworthy. It reflected the admiration and compliments Sasuke had heard about Itachi throughout his childhood. Sasuke became so frustrated that his fists clenched. "It's always the same," he muttered angrily. "Someone always outshines me. First Itachi, now Naruto." There were too many similarities between Naruto and his brother to ignore. Both were praised as geniuses and effortlessly commanded the respect and admiration that Sasuke yearned for. He felt insulted by the mental comparisons, which served as a harsh reminder of his perceived shortcomings. Unaware of Sasuke's distress, Naruto went back to his apartment in the meantime. He kept thinking about Jiraiya's compliments, not as confirmation but as inspiration to keep getting better. Sasuke was just another person who lived with Naruto, he was neither a rival nor a barrier. Naruto looked out the window as the room was painted in warm tones by the setting sun. "Sasuke," he muttered softly, sounding more inquisitive than sentimental. He shrugged and returned to his scrolls, getting ready for the following day. "You're always so intense, I wonder why." As the first stars appeared in the sky, Sasuke's determination solidified. Even if it meant moving into the shadows to avoid Naruto's ever-increasing light, his path was starting to become clear. As Naruto sat atop the Hokage monument and looked down at Konoha, the soft hum of the village at dusk filled the air. He was left alone with his thoughts as the chaos of the day had subsided into a serene rhythm. A silent reminder of the legacy he carried, the fourth Hokage's stone face loomed behind him. He was troubled tonight by his recent promotion to Chunin, the shifts in his peers, Jiraiya's advice, and the responsibilities of his special position. The loneliness was nothing new to Naruto. Perched above the village, watching the lights flicker to life as the sun dipped below the horizon, he had learned over the years to find comfort in such moments. But the burden on his chest felt heavier tonight. He was troubled by memories of Sasuke's scathing remarks, the council's discussions regarding his advancement, and the loneliness of being a one-man cell. The sage's unwavering faith in Jiraiya and his teachings on fusing his affinities for wind and lightning created an additional layer to the mental storm. Naruto's thoughts drifted back to what had happened recently as the wind pulled at his hair. When Naruto's promotion was revealed, there were murmurs of incredulity in the room, making the academy graduation a bittersweet milestone. He recalled the expressions of wonder and distrust, with Sasuke's annoyance simmering beneath the surface. He remembered Hiruzen's quiet words of support and even Danzo's icy practicality. He was just starting to realize how each had influenced him. Another layer had been added by Jiraiya's mentoring, which forced him to hone his skills and comprehend his two affinities for lightning and wind. He thought back to the training sessions where Jiraiya's combination of insight and humor had helped him develop. The sage's belief that Naruto could eventually outperform even his father still seemed unreal. But tonight, he couldn't get Ino's voice out of his head. During his darkest moments, her unwavering support and faith in him had been a beacon of hope. Her words and presence had become a constant reminder that he wasn't entirely alone, even though he wasn't sure how much she had done or said in support of him. Nevertheless, he found himself alone once more, accompanied only by the stars. The silence was broken by a familiar voice asking, brooding again, huh? Naruto turned to see Ino coming toward him, her golden hair gleaming in the dim starlight. With practiced ease, she ascended to the monument and sat next to him without waiting for an invitation. With a tiny smile tugging at his lips, Naruto asked, "How'd you find me?" Ino smiled. "I was heading home and spotted you up here. It's hard to miss someone sitting on the Hokage monument." Naruto shook his head and laughed softly. "Guess I'm predictable." "Not predictable," Ino shot back, giving him a gentle prod. "Just easy to figure out when you're feeling all introspective. So, what's eating at you?" With a pause, Naruto looked down at the village. "I don't know. It's just, everything's changing so fast. The promotion, the missions, the expectations, it's a lot." With a contemplative expression, Ino nodded. "Yeah, I get that. But you're handling it better than you think. Seriously, Naruto, you've been through so much, and you've come out stronger every time. This is just another step." Naruto looked at her and saw the glimmer of sincerity in her face as her words hung in the air. His head rested against the stone monument as he leaned back. He smirked and said, "You know, you don't always have to come to my rescue," breaking the seriousness of the situation. Ino grinned despite rolling her eyes. "Someone's got to keep you from getting lost in your own head. Besides," she said, pausing for a moment before speaking more quietly, "I don't really mind being here." She gave him a playful shove, her shoulder grazing his, but her cheeks flushed a little. Naruto looked back up at the stars. He said, "Well, you're better at it than you think," in a hushed tone. "But don't let it go to your head, okay?" "Too late," Ino teasingly said, her smile growing. There was a beat of silence, and then Ino spoke once more in a softer voice. "You're not the only one carrying a lot, you know. It's okay to let people in sometimes. Even me." Naruto gave her a quick glance, the warmth in her voice strange but not unpleasant. He grinned unevenly and scratched the back of his head. "You're weird, Ino. But, not in a bad way." For a while, they sat in friendly silence while the stars above them glistened like dispersed jewels. He felt reassured by Ino's presence, which served as a constant reminder that he wasn't really alone despite his isolation. She looked up at the sky while leaning back and supporting her weight with her hands. "You know," Ino said with a quiet voice afterwards, "you're not the only one who feels the pressure. We're all trying to figure things out, who we are, where we're going. But I think you've got something special, Naruto. You're not just trying to be strong for yourself. You're trying to be strong for everyone." With a flicker of surprise in his eyes, Naruto looked at her. "You think so?" "I know so," Ino firmly stated. "And that's why you're going to be amazing. You've got this, Naruto. Just don't forget to let people in, okay? We're all here for you." Though unsure of what to say, Naruto couldn't help but think about what she had said. He hardly ever allowed himself to recognize the strange warmth of her encouragement. In an attempt to deflect attention from the unusual sincerity of the situation, Naruto smirked and said, "You're kind of a pain, you know that." With a playful smirk on her lips, Ino arched an eyebrow. "And yet, you let me stay. What does that say about you, Uzumaki?" She gave him a playful shove, but as she looked away, her cheeks blushed slightly. She muttered, "Maybe it says I'm way too nice sometimes," her voice lowering as though she wasn't sure whether to acknowledge it. "Don't get used to it." "Wouldn't dream of it," Naruto said, his smile becoming more sincere. The quiet closeness of the night enveloped them like a mutual secret as they sat there for a little while longer. Ino brushed off her skirt and stood as the evening grew darker. Saying, "Come on," she extended her hand. "Let's get out of here before someone thinks we're plotting something." Taking her hand, Naruto let her help him stand. "Plotting? Huh, you've got quite the imagination." Ino grinned. "Just keeping you on your toes, Uzumaki." They climbed down from the monument together, their laughter mingling with the low murmur of the village. The incident served as a reminder to Naruto that he was still supported and grounded by certain ties, even when he was alone. He recalled Sasuke's brewing animosity, Jiraiya's belief in him, and Danzo's icy teachings, all reminders of the way he had come. And he felt a little less burdened by expectations as he walked next to Ino. There was a small campfire flickering in the middle of the forest clearing, which was peacefully framed by the soft rustle of leaves. Jiraiya and Naruto were seated on opposite sides of the fire, with Jiraiya, the older sage, casually leaning against a log and grinning mischievously. Jiraiya started, "All right, kid," taking a notebook out of his cloak. "You've been awfully secretive lately. What exactly have you been working on during your training?" With his fingers twitching against the edge of his orange jacket, Naruto hesitated. His voice was quieter than usual as he looked away. "You really want to know?" Jiraiya's tone was light, but there was a genuine curiosity in his eyes as he asked, "Of course. What kind of mentor would I be if I didn't?" Naruto stood and brushed the dirt from his knees while inhaling deeply. "Fine, but don't blame me if your jaw hits the ground." Jiraiya chuckled. "Bring it on, kid." In a puff of smoke, Naruto created a hand seal and called forth 3 shadow clones. The clones got to work right away. One drew seals on the ground, while the other made kunai with faint glowing lines. The third started to channel chakra into a complex symbol that was engraved on a sheet of parchment. Jiraiya leaned back against the log as the clones moved precisely, a smile of nostalgia beginning to appear on his face. Flashback. Half a year before. It brought back memories of a specific day months prior when Naruto discovered the Shadow Clone Jutsu's secret. Naruto slammed his hands on the training post and complained, "You're seriously telling me to learn all this stuff with the same 24 hours everyone else has?" You could tell he was frustrated. "Jiraiya-sensei, I need more time." The sound of Jiraiya's laughter seemed to reverberate throughout the training field at that time. He knelt down and quickly sketched the Shadow Clone hand seal in the ground, saying, "Time, huh? Well, you've got the chakra reserves for something most people can't even dream of. Here's a trick your old man mastered, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. It'll let you train in multiple places at once. The clones share your experience, so when they dispel, you'll have everything they learned." Naruto's eyes had grown wide with shock. "Wait, you mean I can multiply myself and learn faster?" "Exactly," Jiraiya had remarked, stroking Naruto's hair with a smile. "But don't get cocky. Using this technique burns through chakra like crazy, and if you overdo it, you'll be flat on your back for days." Jiraiya was astounded by Naruto's perseverance and unadulterated skill, as it had only required hours of trial and error. Naruto was able to call forth and command several clones in that brief period of time, each of whom was performing a different task. While the other half of his clones studied Fuinjutsu scrolls, the other half practiced throwing kunai. Naruto passed out at the end of the day, his breath coming in short gasps but his smile triumphant, and he muttered, "This is going to change everything." With a mixture of pride and incredulity on his face, Jiraiya had crouched next to him. He had whispered, "You're something else, kid," while tousling Naruto's hair. "Your dad would be grinning ear to ear if he saw this." The flashback has ended. Jiraiya couldn't help but be amazed at Naruto's progress as she watched him control his clones with effortless precision. He whispered to himself, "You've taken what I taught you and turned it into something incredible," as his smile grew. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. What's the plan here?" Naruto maintained a muted expression despite a slight smirk. "Just watch." The clearing soon hummed with a barely perceptible energy. The clones coordinated their movements, creating seals and hurling the ready-made kunai in exact locations throughout the clearing. A shimmering barrier rose momentarily as Naruto activated the main seal, crackling with wind energy before disappearing into the darkness. "Hoin Fuin," Naruto said, dismissing his hands. "A containment seal reinforced with wind chakra. It's still a prototype, but it's strong enough to hold back most enemies." Jiraiya's eyes glowed with pride and surprise as his smile grew. "Impressive. And that's just the warm-up, right?" Despite his inherent reserve, Naruto nodded with a slight increase in confidence. "Next up," he motioned to another clone, who gave him a kunai bearing a distinctive seal. Naruto took a deep breath, concentrated his chakra, and vanished in a burst of light, only to reappear a short distance away. Despite his best efforts to remain calm, Jiraiya's mouth curved into an impressed grin. "You've been holding out on me," he said mockingly. "That's the Makansei Hiraishin, and you've pushed it a lot further than the last time I saw you use it." A small smile tugged at Naruto's lips, revealing his pride. "I've been working on refining the seals, trying to cut down on the chakra cost. It's still not anywhere near perfect, though." Jiraiya's face changed, showing a mixture of amazement and sincere pride. Do you even realize how much progress you've made? The last time you showed me, it was barely functional. Now you're blinking across a battlefield like it's second nature. Kid, if Minato could see this, he'd be proud out of his mind. Naruto's smile wavered a little, and he looked down. It's not perfect, and it's not like I'm doing it alone. The scrolls from Danzo, the training with you, it all helps. When Danzo was mentioned, Jiraiya's expression tightened and his brow furrowed slightly. He spoke after a pause, his voice firm but calm. Naruto, I've got to ask. What exactly do you think about Danzo? Startled by the abrupt change in subject, Naruto blinked. Danzo, I mean, he's been a big help. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have gotten access to my clan's scrolls. And he's taught me a lot about strategy and sealing techniques. Sure, he's strict, but he's always told me it's for the village. He's not just a teacher, he's someone who believes in me. When I struggled with handling too many tasks, he didn't just point out my mistakes, he sat with me and taught me how to manage them. And when I started doubting myself, he reminded me that strength isn't just about raw power, but control and patience. He's tough, yeah, but I think it's because he sees something in me. Jiraiya scowled as his eyes strayed to the flickering campfire. And you don't think his methods are a little extreme? With a contemplative expression, Naruto shrugged. Maybe, but he's never lied to me. He's straightforward about what he wants. He believes in protecting Konoha no matter what. Honestly, I think he's just doing what he thinks is right. Even if it's not always nice. With his elbows resting on his knees, Jiraiya leaned forward. Kid, there's a difference between protecting the village and controlling it. Danzo's always been about control, about using people as tools to achieve his goals. Don't let him turn you into one of those tools. Naruto's voice remained steady as his eyes hardened a little. I'm not a tool. Danzo's taught me to think ahead, to be prepared. But he's never treated me like a puppet, never tried to control me. He's helped me grow stronger and made me see things differently, but he's always left the decisions to me. And I'm grateful for that. I know he can be harsh, but I think it's because he really believes in me. I'm not blind, Jiraiya-sensei. I know who I am and what I'm fighting for. After examining him for a while, Jiraiya sighed and said, fair enough, kid, with a small smile tugging at his lips. Tell me you'll keep your eyes open, please. Keep in mind your identity and the people who are important to you. Naruto softened his expression and nodded, saying, I won't. Regards, Jiraiya-sensei. Despite his increasing ease with Jiraiya, Naruto frequently fell silent, his thoughtful nature guiding him to listen more than speak. The two spent the remainder of the evening honing Naruto's techniques. At one point, as he focused on a complex seal, the lines wavered slightly under his brush. Jiraiya leaned back and grinned broadly. Careful there, kid, she said. Looks like someone still needs to work on their chakra control. Naruto rolled his eyes and moaned, curvy sage, I'm doing fine. I'm not wasting energy like I used to, he said in a tone that reflected his growing confidence and contained a rare note of calm assurance. Sure, Mr. Efficient, Jiraiya said, chuckling and leaning forward with a mocking stern expression. However, you're still using twice as much chakra as those seals require. You'll be leading missions with an empty tank if you keep going at this rate. Well, maybe I'll perfect that before you finish that book of yours, Naruto shot back, slyly glancing at Jiraiya's ubiquitous notebook as his lips quirked into a tiny smile. Jiraiya ruffled Naruto's hair and laughed, saying, touché, kid. But keep in mind that there are no shortcuts. You can go farther with precision and control than you can with brute force. As the fire burned low, the clearing was filled with the soft hum of chakra and the faint laughter of teacher and student, their bond becoming stronger by the second. Naruto nodded, his little smile lingering. After a successful recent reconnaissance mission, Naruto and Jiraiya moved quickly through Konoha's busy streets. Both were urgently called to the Hokage's office and understood the significance of the situation, even though neither mentioned it explicitly. Jiraiya looked down at Naruto, watching the boy's eyes dart around the throng. Kid, you've been quieter than normal. Do you have a thought? Naruto paused, adjusting the strap of his kunai pouch with a slight twitch of his fingers. I'm just curious as to why they called us back so soon. Do you believe that something occurred? Although his face softened, Jiraiya shrugged. Don't make snap judgments, but it's possible. Our mission was sound. Lord Hokage most likely just wants the complete report directly from the source. May even acknowledge your progress to some extent. With a slight smile that broke through his usual reserve, Naruto looked up. You really think so? Jiraiya said, of course, while lovingly tousling Naruto's hair. It is evident that you have been working hard. I've observed how you manage yourself. You're resourceful, focused, and strategic. That is not overlooked. Naruto's smile grew a little, but he quickly looked away and spoke quietly. Thank you, Jiraiya-sensei. That is very significant. After a few moments of pleasant silence, Jiraiya spoke again in a light but inquisitive tone. Since we began training together, you've developed significantly. Don't let it get to you, okay? I'm proud of you. Naruto gave a quiet laugh. I refuse to. After all, I'm still attempting to keep up with you. Jiraiya grinned, amusement wrinkling the corners of his eyes. Excellent response, young one. Let's listen to the elderly man's thoughts. You could feel the tension in the Hokage's office. Sitting behind his desk, Hiruzen Sarutobi studied a scroll that was spread out in front of him with a heavy gaze. By the door, two Anbu agents stood in silence. Jiraiya and Naruto came in, the latter's reserved manner concealing the excitement simmering beneath his calm exterior. Saying, "Thank you both for coming," Hiruzen raised his gaze. His eyes softened a little as they settled on Naruto. This situation has escalated beyond what we anticipated. Before he could continue, Danzo Shimura appeared through the open door. His sole visible eye scanned the room as he stepped in, his cane tapping lightly on the polished floor. Hiruzen, he said abruptly, this mission's intelligence reports are alarming. The situation that Kakashi's team is handling is far more unstable than anticipated. I hope you have a strategy. Jiraiya's tone was sharp and his brow furrowed. You don't usually show this much direct interest, Danzo. For what purpose are you truly here? Danzo's eyes remained fixed. The land of waves is strategically significant. An already unstable area could become unstable if this mission is handled poorly. I assume you have been called in because reinforcements are crucial. He pointed to the scroll, Hiruzen. Just now, this message arrived. The mission of Team 7 has advanced to A rank. They are dealing with far more dangers than were foreseen, such as numerous missing nin reports in the region. Kakashi has asked for reinforcements right away. What can I do? Naruto asked, his fists clenched and his voice steady. Hiruzen looked proud and worried at the same time. I've assigned you to join Team 7 as a reinforcement, Naruto. Jiraiya will go with you all the way to the edge of the Land of Waves, but after that, you will become part of the team and help them protect their client Tazuna. Danzo took a step forward, his voice measured and encouraging, but with a hint of pride in it. Under my direction and Jiraiya's instruction, Naruto has made impressive progress. This mission is a testament to your progress rather than merely an opportunity. Your early missions as an Anbu operative aid sharpened your focus, flexibility, and discipline, which I have witnessed in your handling of challenges. Naruto, you have repeatedly shown that you are capable. Have faith in both yourself and those lessons. Now more than ever, Konoha needs that strength. Hiruzen's tone became icy as his eyes narrowed. Danzo, I was not informed of Naruto's involvement in Anbu operations. Danzo's face stayed composed. It was essential. His potential required more refinement than the academy could offer. The missions were carefully monitored, low risk, and intended to improve his abilities without putting him in unnecessary danger. With a voice that cut through the growing tension, Jiraiya took a step forward. Danzo, you went too far, regardless of whether you felt it was necessary. In the shadows, Naruto is not a tool to be shaped. He is a young shinobi who merits the freedom to follow his own path. With a sharp tone, Danzo turned to face Jiraiya. Jiraiya, what would you have done? Allow him to fumble through the mediocrity of the academy. Idealism is not tolerated in the world of shinobi. Readiness doesn't mean stripping away choice, Jiraiya shot back, his eyes hardening. There is more to Naruto's strength than just training. He is unique because of his heart and his ties. Remember that. With a firm yet level voice, Hiruzen held up a hand. Enough. This is something we will deal with later. For the time being, Team 7's safety and the mission's success are the top priorities. With resolve gleaming in his eyes, Naruto straightened his posture despite his chest tightening. I'll carry it out. I promise not to disappoint them. Naruto was given a sealed scroll by Hiruzen. This includes important details about the mission and resources to help you. Make sensible use of them. Later that afternoon, with the pressure of the moment bearing down on them, Naruto and Jiraiya stood at the village gates. The cobblestone path was covered in long shadows as the sun sank low. With a remarkably solemn expression and a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes, Jiraiya placed both hands on Naruto's shoulders. This is your first A-rank mission, Naruto, Jiraiya said in a more subdued tone. It will put you to the test in ways you've never encountered. To be honest, I'm concerned. It's not about your abilities, I've seen how far you've come, but rather the burden this will place on you. Strength isn't the only factor in missions like this. They are about making choices that you will remember. Naruto's hands clenched into fists as he glanced up at his mentor. Don't worry, Jiraiya-sensei. You and everyone else are supporting me. A small smile flickered across Jiraiya's lips, but his anxiety persisted. You're correct, I want you to know that you are not alone in this. The Hokage, your friends, and even the obstinate old me have faith in you. However, child, his voice trailed off as he hesitated. To me, you resemble a son. None of the shinobi I've trained are like you. Just assure me that you'll continue to be astute. Avoid letting your emotions push you into unmanageable danger. As Jiraiya's words sank in, Naruto's throat constricted and he swallowed hard, gasping for air. He had never heard anyone say anything like that before. He stood motionless for a moment, his fists loosening as a sensation of warmth moved through his chest. He nodded slowly, his voice calm but passionate. Jiraiya-sensei, I swear, I'll bring you pride. Jiraiya ruffled Naruto's hair, his eyes softening and his smile growing. Kid, you already do. Go now and showcase your skills to the world. The forest ahead seemed to go on forever as they entered the path that led out of Konoha, offering challenges that would put Naruto's development, strength, and the ties that made him unique to the test. This mission was no longer the same. It was a turning point in his life.
Yo guys, it's RyugaXD. You already know YouTube has its limit size, so if you want to see the spicier, uncensored, and exclusive stuff I can't post here, check out my Patreon. That's where I drop all my 18+ lemon content, early uploads, and more. Links in the description. Come join the fun.